Welcome, friend. Tonight is not just another night, it's an invitation to step away from the noise of the world, from the restless thoughts that never seem to stop, and into a space where silence itself can heal. You've carried so much today, regrets that whisper from the past, worries that reach forward into tomorrow, the pressure to be someone, to prove something, to keep holding on, even when your hands are tired. But what if tonight you set it all down? These Zen tales are not just stories, they are lanterns placed along a dark path, guiding you gently back to the peace that has always lived inside you. The Buddha once said, "You only lose what you cling to." Tonight, you will not only hear those words, you will begin to feel them, as if each story were a key, unlocking the tightness in your chest, softening the weight you didn't realize you were carrying. So let yourself be here. Let your body grow heavy and safe. Take in one slow, full breath, and as you exhale, imagine the burdens of the day dissolving into the quiet. This is your time, your journey, your chance to discover what it truly means to let go. And by the end of tonight's stories, you may find that you are lighter, freer, and more at peace than you ever expected. Our journey into this freedom begins with a story about a man who learned that his most treasured possession was also his heaviest burden. This is the tale of the monk's only bowl. A Zen monk named Hakuin had only one worldly possession, a simple, beautiful, and ancient wooden bowl that had been given to him by his own master. He treasured it above all else. He ate from it, drank from it, and it was a constant reminder of his spiritual path. One day, he was washing his bowl by the well when it slipped from his wet hands and shattered on the stone ground. A young novice who was nearby saw what happened and was filled with anxiety for the master, expecting him to be devastated. But Hakuin simply looked at the broken pieces for a long moment, and then a slow, serene smile spread across his face. He began to laugh, a soft, gentle laugh of pure relief. "For 20 years, he said to the bewildered novice, "I have been guarding this bowl. I was afraid in the winter that the cold would crack it, and in the summer that the heat would warp it. When I travelled, I worried it would be stolen. My most precious treasure was also my greatest anxiety. Now," he said, kicking the broken pieces gently with his sandal, "I am finally free." This story is a simple but profound teaching on the nature of attachment. It is not our possessions that cause us suffering, but our clinging to them. Hakuin's bowl was a source of beauty, but his attachment to it had turned it into a prison of worry. Its breaking, which seemed like a loss, was actually a moment of profound liberation. The story gently invites us to look at the bowls in our own lives, the possessions, the roles, the identities that we treasure, but that also bring us a subtle, constant anxiety. It reminds us that there is a deep and quiet freedom to be found in the courage to let go. This release from the weight of things reminds us that our greatest burdens are often not objects, but the weight of our own endless effort. This brings us to a tale of a man who believed his strength was in his struggle. This is the story of the boatman who dropped his oars. A young boatman was famous for his great strength. He could row his small boat upstream against the most powerful currents. He saw the river as an opponent to be conquered, and his life was a constant, exhausting battle against its flow. One day, he was rowing with all his might, his muscles straining, when he came upon a small, quiet cove. In the cove, an old Zen master was sitting in a boat that was identical to his, but the master was not rowing. His oars were resting in his boat, and he was simply floating, a look of profound peace on his face. The gentle, swirling eddies of the cove were slowly turning his boat in a graceful, silent circle. "Master," the young man called out, panting with effort. "The current is so strong today. How do you have the strength to rest?" The old master smiled. "It is you who are spending all your strength," he replied. "You are fighting the river. I have simply learned to trust it. I know that in this part of the river, the current will eventually carry me where I need to go. Your goal is up the river. My goal is to be in harmony with the river. So my journey is peaceful, and yours is a battle. The strength you are looking for is not in your arms. It is in your willingness to put down your oars." The boatman's struggle is a mirror for our own lives. We often believe that life is a battle to be won through constant effort and control, We row furiously against the currents of our own experience, trying to force the outcomes we desire. The Master's wisdom is the wisdom of surrender, of letting go of the struggle. This is not about giving up. It is about learning to distinguish between the times when effort is needed and the times when the wisest and most effective action is to simply be still, to trust the flow, and to allow life to carry us. Just as the boatman learned to surrender to the river's current, another man once learned that the past is a river we cannot re-enter, a storm whose rain we need not carry with us. This brings us to the tale of the man who carried yesterday's rain. A man was walking home on a sunny afternoon, but he was walking with a large, heavy, and fully open umbrella held over his head. His neighbours, seeing this strange sight, asked him, "Friend, why are you carrying an open umbrella? The sun is shining, and there is not a cloud in the sky." The man looked at them with a sad and weary face. "You do not understand," he said. "It may be sunny now, but yesterday on this very road, I was caught in a terrible, drenching rainstorm. I am just being prepared." And he continued on his way, struggling under the unnecessary weight of his umbrella, his face in a deep shadow, unable to feel the warmth of the beautiful sunny day on his skin. This simple story is a powerful parable for how we carry the burdens of our past. The rainstorm of yesterday, a past hurt, a failure, a moment of sadness is over. The sun is shining now, but we continue to carry the umbrella of our old grievances, our regrets and our fears. We live in the shadow of a storm that is no longer happening. This mental habit of carrying the past not only is a heavy and unnecessary burden, but it also prevents us from fully experiencing the warmth and the light of the present moment. The story is a gentle invitation to look up and see that the sky is clear. It is an invitation to have the courage to fold up the umbrella of our old stories and to feel the simple, direct and healing reality of the here and now. This same need to let go of what is past is a lesson every gardener knows in their heart. From the burden of memory, we turn to a story about a man who learned the beauty of release from the very things he was trying to protect. This is the tale of the gardener and the fallen petals. A master gardener was known for having the most beautiful rose garden in the entire province. He tended his roses with a devotion that was a kind of meditation. But he had one great sorrow: he hated to see the petals fall. He saw it as a sign of decay, of imperfection, of death. He would spend hours each day gathering the fallen petals, trying to keep his garden looking perfect and timeless. A Zen master came to visit him. He saw the gardener on his hands and knees, a sad expression on his face, picking up the soft, brown-edged petals from the ground. "What are you doing?" the master asked. "I am tidying my garden," the gardener replied. "I am removing the ugliness of what is past." "No," the master said gently. "You are stealing the food of what is to come. These fallen petals are not the death of the rose. They are its gift to the earth. They will become the soil that will nourish the new buds of next spring. Their letting go is not an end. It is an act of generosity. The rose does not cling to its own beauty. It offers it freely, and then it lets it go. That is why it is so beautiful." The gardener looked at the fallen petals in his hand, and for the first time he did not see decay. He saw the quiet promise of a future spring. This story is a beautiful teaching on the grace of impermanence. We are often like the gardener, trying to hold on to the perfect blooms of our lives, our youth, our moments of success, our happy times. We see the falling petals of change and aging as a tragedy. But the Master's wisdom is to see this process not as one of loss, but as one of profound and beautiful transformation. Letting go is not an end. It is the necessary and graceful act that creates the space for new life and new beginnings. This same need to let go applies not only to things, but to the very idea of who we are. A great warrior once learned this lesson, not on the battlefield, but in a moment of quiet vulnerability. This brings us to the story of the general's armor. A great general had worn his heavy suit of black armor for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to be without it. It was his strength, his identity, his protection from the world. But it was also a heavy, lonely prison. One day he was walking in a garden when he saw a small child trying to help a butterfly that was tangled in a spider's web. The general went to help, but his thick, iron gauntlets were too clumsy. He could not touch the delicate threads without destroying the butterfly's wings. He stood there for a long moment, watching the small creature struggle. Then, with a great and difficult effort, he did something he had not done in 20 years. He began to unbuckle the straps of his armor. He took off his heavy gauntlets, and with his own bare human hands, he reached out and gently, carefully freed the butterfly. As the small creature flew away into the sun, the general stood there, feeling the warm air on his hands and the lightness in his own heart, and he realized that true strength is not in the armor that protects us, but in the vulnerability that allows us to connect. This story is a poignant metaphor for the emotional and psychological armor we all wear. We build it to protect ourselves from being hurt, the armor of pride, of cynicism, of being strong, but this armor also prevents us from truly touching the world and from being touched by it. The general's great act of courage was not in facing an army, but in his willingness to take off his own defenses to perform a small act of kindness. It is a reminder that our deepest connections and our most profound moments of grace often happen only when we are willing to let go of our armor and show the world our own gentle, vulnerable, and human hands. From the weight of our identity, we turn to the weight of our own knowledge. This brings us to a tale of a man who believed his wisdom was in the books he carried, and the fire that taught him a different kind of truth. This is the story of the library and the flame. A scholar had dedicated his entire life to collecting rare and profound spiritual books. His library was his fortress and his pride. He believed that the wisdom of the universe was contained on its shelves. One night, a fire started in his library. He woke to the smell of smoke and the sight of flames devouring his life's work. His first instinct was to rush in to save the scrolls, but a strange and powerful stillness came over him. He simply stood outside and watched the great, cleansing fire. He watched as all his theories, all his concepts, all the words of other men turned to smoke and ash and were carried away into the night sky. The next morning, his disciples found him sitting peacefully amidst the smoking ruins. "Master," they cried, "everything is lost. Your entire life's work is gone." The scholar looked up at them, and his eyes were clearer and brighter than they had ever been before. "Yes," he said, "everything that could be burned has been burned, and now for the first time I am left with only the wisdom that cannot be consumed by any flame." This story is a powerful Zen teaching on the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is the information we accumulate from the outside. It is the library, and it is valuable. But it is also flammable. It can be lost. It can become outdated. It can become a prison for the mind. True wisdom, the story teaches, is not what we know, but the quality of our own being. It is the peace, the clarity, and the compassion that remains, even when all our concepts and all our certainties have been burned away. The fire was not a tragedy. It was a profound act of purification. It was a life-changing invitation to let go of all second-hand knowledge and to find the unburnable truth within his own direct experience. The anxiety that comes from clinging to what we have is a cousin to the anxiety that comes from fearing what is to come. This brings us to a story about a man who spent his life preparing for a disaster that never arrived in the way he expected. This is the tale of the farmer and the coming flood. The farmer lived in a valley that was prone to flooding. Every year he would look at the sky with a heart full of anxiety. He would spend all his energy building higher and higher walls around his small field, trying to protect it from the great flood he was sure was coming. He did not sing as he worked. His mind was always in the future, rehearsing the disaster. His neighbor was a Zen master who had a simple, unfenced field. He would spend his days simply tending his crops with a quiet and a joyful heart. "You are a fool," the first farmer would say. "The flood will come, and it will wash away all your work." The master would just smile. One year, a terrible drought came to the land instead. The river dried up to a trickle. The first farmer's crops, which were surrounded by his high protective walls, received no water at all, and they withered and died. The master's field, which was open and unfenced, was able to receive the tiny amount of moisture that still flowed in the deep central channel of the river, and his crops survived. The anxious farmer came to the master, his heart broken. "I do not understand," he said. I spent my whole life preparing for the wrong disaster. No, the master said gently. The disaster you were preparing for was never the flood. The disaster was the wall you built in your own heart. You were so busy protecting yourself from a future you could not control that you cut yourself off from the nourishment that was available in the present. This story is a simple but profound teaching on the nature of worry. Worry is the act of building walls against a future that may never happen or may happen in a completely unexpected way. This not only is an exhausting waste of our energy, but it can also prevent us from being open and receptive to the reality that is right in front of us. The Master's wisdom is to live with an open field. This does not mean being unprepared. It means cultivating an inner state of openness, of trust, and of resilience, so that we can respond skillfully to whatever life actually brings, whether it is a flood or a drought. This same open state of being is often expressed not in grand gestures, but in the simplest movements of our own body. This brings us to a quiet tale of a master who taught his greatest lesson with his own two hands. This is the story of the unclenched hand. A young student came to a Zen master. He was a man of great tension. His jaw was always tight, his shoulders were always hunched, and his hands were almost always clenched into tight fists, as if he were constantly bracing himself for a fight. "Master," he said, "I have come to learn how to find peace." The master did not speak. He simply held up his own hand, and he clenched it into a tight, white-knuckled fist. "What is this?" he asked. "It is a fist," the student replied. "And is this a comfortable and a natural state?" the master asked. "No," the student admitted. "It is a state of tension and struggle." The master then slowly, consciously, and with a gentle sigh of release, unclenched his fist. He let his fingers open and relax until his hand was resting, soft and open, in his lap. "And what is this?" he asked. "It is an open hand," the student said. "This," the master said, "is the entire teaching. Your mind is like this hand. You are always clenching it around your worries, your plans, and your grievances. You do not need to find peace. You only need to stop doing the thing that is disturbing it. Simply, gently, and with a kind heart, unclench your hand." This story is a beautiful and direct physical metaphor for the practice of letting go. We are often unaware of the subtle and chronic tension we are holding in our minds and in our bodies. We are constantly clenching around our thoughts and fears. The Master's lesson is a life-changing realization. Peace is not something we have to add or achieve. It is our natural state. It is what is here when we can simply stop the habit of clenching. As you lie here tonight, can you feel the places in your own body where you might be clenching? Your jaw, your shoulders, your stomach, your hands. You do not need to fight this tension. You can simply bring a gentle, loving awareness to it, and in that awareness you can invite it, just like the Master's hand, to soften, to open, and to let go. This letting go is often a process of harmonizing with the natural flow of life, rather than trying to reverse it. This brings us to a story about a man who learned that the only way forward is to release the past. This is the tale of the river that flowed backwards. There was a man who lived his life in a state of deep and constant regret. He was haunted by a single great mistake he had made in his youth. He spent all his energy trying to mentally go back in time to fix his past. His life was a stagnant, joyless pool because his entire being was focused on trying to make the river of his life flow backwards. One day he came to a Zen master who was sitting by a real river. "Master," the man said, "I cannot find peace. My past is a constant torment." The master did not speak. He simply picked up a dry leaf from the ground and he dropped it into the current of the river. They watched together as the leaf was immediately caught by the flow and began its long, inexorable journey downstream toward the great, distant ocean. "The river only knows one direction," the master said softly. "You can stand on the bank and wish for it to flow backwards with all your might, but it will not. Your own life is like this river. Your past is like the wake of a boat. It is a trail that shows where you have been, but it has no power over where you are going now, unless you choose to spend your whole journey staring at it. The only way to find peace is to turn around, to face the direction the river is flowing, and to let it carry you." This story is a simple but profound teaching on the nature of regret in the past. We are often like the man, our energy and our attention completely consumed by trying to mentally change a past that cannot be changed. This is an exhausting and futile struggle. The Master's wisdom is in the simple, radical acceptance of the nature of time. The river flows in one direction. The practice is to learn to align ourselves with this flow. This does not mean we do not learn from our past, but it means that we do not live there. It is the practice of gently and again turning our attention away from the wake of our regrets and toward the vast, open and unwritten ocean of our future, which begins in this one single present moment. This same present moment is the only place we can truly live, a truth we discover in our next story. It is a tale that brings us back to the most simple and profound reality of our own mind. This is the story of the sky that let go of the clouds. A young student was deeply troubled by his own thoughts. "Master," he said, "my mind is a chaos of clouds. There are dark clouds of sadness, stormy clouds of anger, and 100 small grey clouds of worry. I try to push them away, but they always return. How can I find the clear blue sky?" The master replied, "You are making a great mistake. You are looking for the sky on the other side of the clouds. You believe that you must first get rid of the clouds in order to find the sky, but the sky is not afraid of the clouds. It does not try to push them away. It simply allows them to be, knowing that they are just temporary visitors. It holds them all, the dark and the light, in its own vast, silent and loving embrace." He then pointed up. "Look, the sky is not behind the clouds. The sky is what the clouds are happening in. It is always here. You do not need to get rid of your thoughts. You only need to remember that you are the sky." This story is a beautiful and liberating teaching on the nature of our own awareness. We are often like the student, identifying with the clouds of our thoughts and emotions. We believe we are our sadness, we are our anger. This creates a state of constant struggle. The Master's life-changing insight is to shift our identification. We are not the fleeting weather of our mind. We are the vast, open and ever-present sky of consciousness in which all that weather occurs. The clouds can be stormy, but they can never harm or stain the sky itself. The practice is to learn to rest as this spacious, witnessing sky, and to allow the clouds of our experience to come and to go, without clinging to them and without pushing them away. In this gentle, spacious allowing, we discover a peace that is as vast, as quiet, and as unshakable as the sky itself. That vast, quiet, and unshakable sky of our own awareness is our true home. This brings us to a quiet teaching about a woman who learned that her greatest strength was not in being whole, but in embracing her own brokenness. This is the tale of the cracked teacup's wisdom. In a small tea house, there was a beautiful old ceramic teacup that was the tea master's favourite, but it had a long, thin, dark crack running down its side, a memory of a time it had been dropped. A wealthy guest, who was a collector of perfect things, saw the master using the cup. "Master," he said, "that is a beautiful cup, but it is flawed. It is broken. Why do you not discard it and use one of your perfect cups?" The tea master smiled and filled the cracked cup with steaming, fragrant green tea. He held it up to the light. "You see this crack as a flaw," he said. "I see it as its history, but more than that," he continued, as a tiny single drop of green tea seeped through the crack and fell onto the wooden table, leaving a small dark mark. "This crack is the cup's one great teaching." The guest was confused. "What does it teach?" "It teaches me," the master said, "that we are all like this cup. We are all a little bit broken. We all have our cracks and our flaws. We try to hide them, to pretend we are perfect. But we all leak a little. We leak our sorrows, our fears, our secret pains, and this is not a sad thing. It is what makes us human. It is what allows us to connect with each other. This cup does not pretend to be perfect. It honestly and humbly holds its tea, and it leaks its one small tear. And in its honest brokenness, it is the most beautiful and the truest cup I own." This story is a gentle and profound teaching on the Japanese aesthetic of kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold, which sees the breakage and repair as part of the object's beautiful history, not something to disguise. We are often like the wealthy guest, judging ourselves and others by a standard of flawless perfection. We see our own cracks, our vulnerabilities, our past traumas, our imperfections as sources of shame. The Master's wisdom is a life-changing invitation to embrace our own beautiful brokenness. It is to understand that our cracks are not a sign of our weakness, but a testament to our history, to our resilience, and to our shared humanity. This same gentle acceptance is what allows us to make peace, not just with our own flaws, but with the parts of ourselves we have tried to disown. This brings us to a story about a man who was haunted by his own shadow, and the surprising way he found his freedom. This is the tale of the man who forgave his own shadow. There was a man who was deeply ashamed of his own shadow. He saw it as a dark, ugly, and distorted version of himself. He spent his life trying to get rid of it. He would run towards the sun, trying to leave it behind. He would stay in brightly lit rooms, hoping to banish it, but it was always there, clinging to his heels. One day he came to a Zen master. "Master," he said, "I am tormented by this dark and useless shadow. How can I be free of it?" The master led the man to a quiet courtyard where the sun was shining brightly. "Your shadow is not your enemy," the master said. "It is your oldest and most faithful companion. It has been with you your entire life. It has never left you. It asks for nothing, and it is the one thing that proves, without a doubt, that you are standing in the light." He then simply said, "Bow to your shadow." The man was shocked. Bow to this ugly thing, but he trusted the master. He turned, and for the first time, he looked directly at his own long, dark shadow on the ground, and he bowed, a gesture of simple respect and acceptance. And in that moment his long war with himself was over. He realized his shadow was not a flaw. It was simply a natural part of being a solid body in a sunlit world. And in that simple acceptance, he found a wholeness he had never known. This story is a deep psychological and spiritual teaching. The shadow represents all the parts of ourselves that we have disowned or repressed. Our anger, our fear, our greed, our vulnerabilities. We are like the man, spending our lives trying to run from these parts, believing that to be good or spiritual is to be only light. But the Master's wisdom is that wholeness is not found in getting rid of our shadow, but in turning to face it with a compassionate and accepting heart. The shadow is not a sign that something is wrong with us. It is a sign that we are human. The life-changing practice is to learn to bow to these difficult parts of ourselves, to acknowledge them with a gentle acceptance, and to integrate them into the wholeness of our being. This same wholeness is often found not in grand effort, but in the simplest act of letting go. This brings us to a quiet story of an artist who discovered his true art only when he was willing to release his own hand. This is the tale of the sculptor who dropped his chisel. A sculptor was carving a magnificent statue of Kannon, the Bodhisattva of compassion, from a huge block of wood. He was a master craftsman, and he worked for years, his mind filled with a perfect image of the final form, but he was never satisfied. The face he carved was always too stern or too aloof. It lacked the living warmth of true compassion. One day, in a state of deep frustration, he threw down his chisel and his mallet. "I cannot do it," he cried. "My own hands, my own skill are getting in the way." He left his workshop and went to sit in the temple for the rest of the day. He did not meditate, he just sat. He let go of his desire to be a great sculptor. He let go of his image of the perfect statue. He simply sat. And he allowed his own heart to feel all of its own sorrow, its own frustration, and its own deep longing for peace. The next morning, he returned to his workshop. He did not pick up his chisel. He simply went to the half-finished statue, and with his own bare, calloused hands, he began to gently sand the wooden face. He did not try to carve an expression. He just sanded, his movements slow and rhythmic, his mind as quiet as the wood. And as he sanded, a face began to emerge from the wood, not the one he had planned, but one that was full of a deep, gentle, and profoundly human compassion. He had finally created his masterpiece, not by doing more, but by doing less. He had let go of his own clever hands, and he had allowed the heart of the wood to speak for itself. This story is a beautiful teaching on the nature of creative surrender. We are often like the sculptor, believing that the path to our goals is through more effort, more control, and more skillful doing. But the sculptor's breakthrough came in the moment he let go of his tools and his own striving. His final perfect act was an act of non-doing, of gentle, patient, and loving attention. This is a life-changing lesson for how we approach our own lives. When we are faced with a great challenge, our instinct is to do more. But what if the wisest course is to simply stop, to become quiet, and to let a deeper, more intuitive wisdom emerge? This wisdom often reminds us that the greatest burdens we carry are the ones that are completely invisible. This brings us to a story about a king who believed his power was in his crown and the quiet truth that set him free. This is the tale of the king's invisible crown. There was a great king who was never seen without his magnificent, heavy golden crown. It was a symbol of his power and his divine right to rule. He wore it at all times even, it was said, when he slept. He believed that the crown was the source of his authority. But the crown was incredibly heavy. It gave him constant headaches, and its weight made his neck and shoulders ache. He could never lean back and rest, for fear it would fall off. He was a prisoner of the very symbol of his own power. One day, a wandering Zen monk came to the court. The king, as was his custom, sat very straight and tall on his throne, his face a mask of regal stillness, bearing the great weight of his crown. The monk looked at him for a long time. He did not speak of the Dharma. He simply asked, "Your Majesty, does it have to be so heavy?" The question was so simple, so direct, and so unexpected that it broke through the king's lifetime of conditioning. He looked at the monk, and for the first time he felt the true physical weight of the crown on his head. He felt the ache in his own neck, and he realized that its power was just a story, a belief that he and his people had agreed to. Its weight, however, was real. Slowly, with a sense of profound and trembling relief, he reached up and he took off his crown, and in that moment he was no longer a king. He was just a man with a light and a free heart. This story is a powerful metaphor for the invisible crowns that we all wear, the burdens of our own self-image, our responsibilities, our ambitions, our need to be seen as strong or successful. We believe these things give us our identity and our power, but they are often just incredibly heavy. The monk's simple question is the question of mindfulness itself. It gently asks us to feel the actual lived cost of the burdens we are carrying. The story teaches that true power is not in the crown we wear, but in the freedom to take it off. This same freedom is often found not in what we say, but in what we are willing to leave unsaid. This brings us to a tale of a student who learned that the greatest wisdom is in knowing what to let go of. This is the story of the weight of the unspoken word. Two monks, an elder and a junior, were having a debate about a fine point of Dharma. The junior monk was very clever, and he had cornered the elder monk in a logical inconsistency. The elder monk, his pride wounded, said something harsh and unkind to the junior monk. A moment of tense, ugly silence fell between them. The junior monk, though he had been insulted, saw the pain and the shame in his elder's eyes. The junior monk had a brilliant, cutting and perfectly logical retort on the tip of his tongue, a retort that would have won him the argument completely and humiliated his elder. He opened his mouth to speak. But then he paused. He looked at his elder brother, and he saw not an opponent, but just a fellow, fallible human being. And with a quiet and a conscious act of will, he simply swallowed the clever, winning word. He let it go. He just bowed his head in a simple gesture of respect. Later that day, the elder monk came to him, his eyes full of tears. "Thank you," he said. "The word you did not speak was the greatest and most compassionate teaching you have ever given me." This story is a subtle but profound teaching on the practice of right speech and the power of letting go of the need to be right. We are often like the junior monk, our minds armed with clever retorts and winning arguments, and in the heat of a conflict, the desire to use these weapons can be overwhelming. But the monk's moment of hesitation and his final act of swallowing the word was an act of deep wisdom and compassion. He understood that winning the argument was less important than preserving the connection. He chose kindness over cleverness. This is a life-changing practice. How many times in our own lives do we say the thing that is true, but that is also unkind and unnecessary? The story reminds us that sometimes the most powerful, the most healing, and the most spiritual word we can ever utter is the one we consciously choose to leave unspoken. This choice, to let go of our own story in order to be present for another, is at the heart of our next story. It is a tale of an artist who believed her work was to create a masterpiece until she discovered a greater purpose. This is the tale of the weaver who undid the tapestry. A master weaver had spent 7 years of her life creating a great and magnificent tapestry. It was the story of the life of the Buddha, and it was a work of breathtaking beauty and skill. It was to be unveiled at a great ceremony. On the morning of the ceremony, a young woman came to the weaver's workshop. She was in a state of deep and inconsolable grief. Her own young son had just died. "Master," she wept, "they say you are a woman of wisdom. Please help me. My heart is a tangle of unbearable pain." The master weaver looked at her own magnificent, perfect and completed tapestry, and then she looked at the raw, tangled and broken heart of the woman in front of her. She made a decision. She did not offer words of comfort. She simply took the young woman's hand and led her to the great loom. "There is only one way to work with a tangle like this," she said, her voice full of a deep and quiet compassion. "We must unweave it, one thread at a time." And together the two women, one a great master and one a grieving mother, began the slow, patient and silent work of undoing the 7 years of the master's perfect labour. And in that shared, simple and loving act of undoing, the young woman's heart began, thread by painful thread, to find its own release. This story is a profound teaching on the nature of compassionate action. The weaver's masterpiece was a beautiful thing, but it was a finished story, a thing of the past. The grieving woman's heart was the living, suffering reality of the present moment. The weaver's great enlightenment was her willingness to let go of her own perfect creation, her own past achievement, in order to be fully present for the messy, imperfect, and immediate need of another human being. She understood that the ultimate purpose of her skill was not to create a beautiful object, but to be a vessel for healing and connection. This same healing is often a process not of addition, but of gentle release. This brings us to a story about a man who was a prisoner of his own past, and the simple truth that melted his chains. This is the tale of the memory of the melted snowflake. There was a man who was haunted by the memory of a single perfect snowflake he had seen as a child. He had caught it on his glove, and its beauty was so perfect, so intricate, that it had become the standard by which he judged everything else in his life. No moment, no experience, no person could ever live up to the memory of that one perfect and now long-lost thing. His life was a shadow, lived in a state of constant, low-grade disappointment. He went to a Zen master. "I am a prisoner of a beautiful memory," he said. "How can I find that perfection again?" The master led him to a quiet room. He took a piece of paper and a brush, and with a single, elegant stroke, he painted a perfect circle. "This is your memory," he said. "It is a beautiful, closed and perfect thing." Then he took a cup of water, and he gently poured it over the paper. The perfect, black circle of ink began to bleed, to soften, to blur, and to flow, creating a new, strange, and beautiful pattern of grey and black. "This," the master said, "is your life. It is not a perfect, static memory. It is a fluid, changing, and perfectly imperfect flow. You have been trying to live in the memory. You have been afraid to let the water of the present moment touch it. The only way to be free is to let the snowflake melt." This story is a gentle teaching on our attachment to the past. We all have perfect snowflakes in our memories, past moments of joy, of love, of success. And while these memories are beautiful, they can, like the man's, become a prison. They can prevent us from fully embracing the real, living, and imperfect beauty of the present moment. The master's wisdom is in the act of pouring the water. It is a call to allow the present to touch our past, to let our memories soften and flow, to see them not as a perfect standard to live up to, but as a beautiful part of the ever-changing river of our own life. This river of life often has no clear destination, a truth that can be a source of great anxiety or great freedom. This brings us to a tale about a student who demanded a map and a master who gave him a pair of good shoes. This is the story of the path that had no destination. A young, earnest student, came to a Zen master. "Master," he said, "I am ready to begin my journey. Please tell me, where does the path of Zen lead? What is the final destination?" The master looked at the young man's anxious, striving face. "The path of Zen," he replied, "is like a beautiful path that winds through a great and ancient forest. It has no destination. Its only purpose is the walking of it." The student was confused. "But if there is no destination, what is the point of the journey? How will I know if I am making progress?" "The point of the journey," the master said, "is to learn to walk with a full and an open heart. The progress is not in how far you have gone, but in the quality of your attention to each single step. You are so worried about the end of the road that you will miss the beauty of the forest. I cannot give you a destination, but I can give you this." And he handed the student a simple pair of sturdy sandals. "Learn to walk well," he said, "and the path will take care of itself." This story is a life-changing teaching on letting go of our obsession with goals and outcomes. We live in a culture that is deeply goal-oriented. We are always trying to get somewhere. This can create a constant feeling that we are not yet there, that we are not yet good enough. The Master's wisdom is to shift our focus from the future destination to the present process. The path is the goal. The journey is the destination. The practice is not about arriving at a future state of peace. It is about learning to walk with a peaceful heart right here, right now, on the often winding and sometimes confusing path of our own life. This same journey is one that we must all ultimately take alone, a truth we discover in our next story. It is a tale of a group of students who were prisoners, and the simple, overlooked key to their own freedom. This is the story of the cage door that was never locked. A Zen master had a group of disciples who were all very earnest, but who were also very dependent on him. They would ask him for permission for everything, and they would not make a single move without his guidance. One day the master announced that he was going on a long journey and that he would be gone for many years. He gathered his students together in a large, sturdy cage that stood in the monastery courtyard. He ushered them all inside, and then he closed the heavy iron door, and he slid a great wooden bolt across it. "You will stay here," he said, "and you will practice. When you have found the key to your own liberation, you may come out." And then he walked away. The disciples were thrown into a state of panic. They were trapped. For years they tried to get out. They tried to break the bars. They tried to pick the lock. They chanted, and they performed rituals, but they remained prisoners. Finally, after many years, an old, weary disciple, who had given up all hope of escape, happened to lean against the great iron door, and it swung silently open. The great wooden bolt that the master had slid across had only been a pantomime. The door had never been locked at all. This story is a profound teaching on the nature of our own freedom. We are often like the disciples. We believe that we are trapped by our circumstances, by our past, by our own minds, and we believe that the key to our freedom is held by someone else, by a teacher, a teaching, a special technique. We are always looking for an external savior, but the Master's great, compassionate and silent lesson is that the cage door has never been locked. Our sense of being a prisoner is a belief, a story, a habit of mind. It is not the ultimate reality. The freedom we are seeking is not something we have to achieve or break our way into. It is our own natural state. The path is not about finding a key. It is about discovering that there is no lock. That stunning realization that the cage door was never locked is the very heart of liberation. It reminds us that the freedom we seek is not a distant goal, but a present reality we can awaken to. This awakening often comes not in a grand vision, but in a simple, direct encounter with the world as it is. This brings us to a quiet story about a student who was searching for a great teaching and a master who offered him a simple gift. This is the tale of the master's gift of emptiness. A young, wealthy, and very eager student came to a Zen master. He had brought a magnificent gift, a large, intricately carved jade statue of the Buddha. He placed it before the master with a great flourish. "Master," he said, "I have brought you this priceless treasure. In return, please give me your greatest teaching. Give me the gift of the Dharma." The master accepted the beautiful statue with a simple nod. He then went to a bare corner of his hut, picked up a simple, empty clay begging bowl, and he presented it to the young man. "Thank you for your gift," he said. "Please accept this gift from me in return." The young man was confused and a little insulted. "Master," he said, "this is just an empty bowl." "Yes," the master replied, a gentle smile in his eyes. "It is the greatest gift I have to give. Your gift to me was full of value, full of your own pride, full of your expectation of a return. My gift to you is empty. It is empty of all value, all pride, and all expectation. If you can learn to hold this emptiness in your heart, if you can learn to be at peace with a mind that is not full of wanting, you will have received the entire Dharma." This story is a profound teaching on the nature of our own mind. We are often like the young student, believing that the spiritual path is about acquiring things, acquiring knowledge, acquiring experiences, acquiring a state of peace. We are always trying to fill our bowl. The Master's wisdom is a radical counterpoint. He shows that true peace is not found in acquisition, but in a state of inner emptiness, a mind that is free from the constant restless striving of the ego. This emptiness is not a void. It is a state of spacious, open, and receptive presence. It is the freedom that comes when we let go of our need for more. This same freedom is often what allows us to face the inevitable losses of life with grace. This brings us to a story about a farmer who learned that true security is not in what we have, but in the quality of our own heart. This is the tale of the farmer's empty granary. There was a farmer who was a man of deep and simple faith. One year, there was a terrible drought, and his harvest was very small. He had only enough grain to fill a single small granary, just enough to feed his own family through the coming winter. One night, a desperate, hungry thief broke into his farm and stole all the grain from his one small granary. The next morning, the farmer discovered the theft. His family was filled with fear and despair. "We are ruined," they cried. "We will starve this winter." The farmer, however, was quiet. He went and stood before his now empty granary. He looked at the empty space where his family's security had been. But instead of despair, a strange and profound peace began to fill his heart. He closed his eyes and he made a simple prayer. To the unknown person who was so hungry that they had to steal, he whispered, "I hope that this grain brings you some nourishment and some peace, and I offer you my forgiveness." He then went back to his family. "Do not worry," he said. "We have lost our grain, but we have not lost our hearts. We will share what little we have with our neighbors, and we will trust that the way will be shown." This story is a deep teaching on the power of non-attachment and forgiveness. For most of us, the loss of our entire life savings would be a catastrophe, a source of great anger and fear. But the farmer's spiritual practice was so deep that he was able to let go of the grain instantly. His security was not in the granary. It was in his own compassionate heart and in his trust in the flow of life. His immediate response was not anger, but a prayer for the well-being of the person who had harmed him. This is a life-changing practice. It is the understanding that when we hold on to anger and resentment, we are only poisoning ourselves. By letting go, by offering forgiveness, the farmer did not get his grain back, but he kept his peace, which was a far greater treasure. This peace is often disturbed by the ghosts of our past, the memories we refuse to release. This brings us to a quiet tale about a man who was haunted, and the simple act that set him free. This is the story of the ghost on the road. There was a man who in his youth had betrayed a dear friend. The friend had moved away, and the man never had a chance to ask for forgiveness. For 20 years he was haunted by the memory of what he had done. It was like a ghost that walked beside him on the road of his life, whispering words of shame and regret in his ear. He finally went to a Zen master. "I am haunted by a ghost," he said. "How can I make it go away?" "You cannot make a ghost go away by fighting it," the master said. "You can only make it go away by turning to face it. The next time the ghost appears, I want you to stop walking. I want you to turn to it, and I want you to bow and to say these words, 'You are right. I was wrong. I am sorry.'" The man thought this was strange, but he agreed to try. The next day as he walked, the familiar, heavy presence of the ghost of his regret appeared beside him. His first instinct was to run, but instead he stopped. He turned. He looked at the empty space where he felt the ghost to be, and with a sincere and a breaking heart, he bowed and said, "You are right. I was wrong. I am sorry." And in that moment of complete and total acceptance of his own past, in that moment of profound and humble apology to his own memory, the ghost simply dissolved into the clear morning air. The road ahead was, for the first time in 20 years, open and clear. This story is a profound teaching on the nature of guilt and forgiveness. We are often haunted by the ghosts of our past mistakes, and we spend our energy trying to run from them, to ignore them, or to justify them. This only gives them more power. The Master's wisdom is radical. It is the practice of turning to face our own past with honesty, humility, and a deep sense of responsibility. The act of bowing is an act of profound self-acceptance. It is the moment we stop fighting with what we have done, and we simply own it. Paradoxically, it is in this very act of complete acceptance that the release is found. We cannot change the past, but we can change our relationship to it, and in doing so, we can free our present from its chains. This same freedom is often what eludes us when we are too focused on the outcome of our actions. This brings us to a story about a great warrior who learned that the greatest victory is the one you are willing to let go of. This is the tale of the unheld victory. A great and undefeated general was facing his final and most important battle. The fate of his entire kingdom depended on it. He was a man of great discipline, but his mind was in turmoil. His desire to win and his fear of losing were a terrible storm in his heart. He went to a Zen master who lived in a small temple on the battlefield. "Master," he said, "I am about to fight for my kingdom. My mind is not clear. Tell me, how can I be sure of victory?" The master did not give him a strategy. He simply said, "True victory is not found on the battlefield. It is found in your own mind. Before the battle ever begins, go to your tent, sit in meditation, and do not get up until you have completely and utterly accepted the possibility of your own defeat. Do not get up until you are truly and completely willing to lose everything. When you can hold the thought of your own death and the ruin of your kingdom in your heart with a perfect and an unshakable peace, then you will be ready to fight." The general did as he was told. He sat for a day and a night, wrestling with his own deepest fears, and finally, a great and profound stillness settled over him. He had let go of his desperate need to win. He had made peace with the worst possible outcome, and in that moment, his fear was gone. He went into the battle the next day, not with the tight, anxious energy of a man who was afraid to lose, but with the fluid, open, and powerful energy of a man who was already free. And because he was free, he was invincible. This story is a deep and life-changing teaching on the paradox of letting go. We often believe that our success depends on the intensity of our desire, but the Master's wisdom is to see that this very desire can be the source of our greatest weakness. It creates tension, fear, and a rigid mind. The general's great insight was that true power comes from a place of profound acceptance and non-attachment to the outcome. When we can let go of our desperate need for things to turn out a certain way, we are free to act with our greatest clarity, wisdom, and power. This same wisdom of release is mirrored in the great silent teachings of nature itself. This brings us to a quiet story of a great tree and the lesson it taught a monk about the grace of letting go. This is the story of the tree that let go of its leaves. The young monk was deeply troubled by the coming of autumn. He loved the vibrant green leaves of the great maple tree in the monastery courtyard, and he saw their turning to gold and red, and their eventual fall as a kind of death, a great and terrible loss. He would spend his days in a state of quiet melancholy. He saw the old Zen master, the abbot of the monastery, standing under the tree one afternoon, a gentle, peaceful smile on his face, as a shower of golden leaves drifted down around him. "Master," the monk said sadly, "are you not filled with sorrow? The tree is letting go of all its beauty. It is dying." The abbot looked at the young monk with compassion. "You see this as a death," he said, "but the tree knows it is a wisdom. The tree knows that it cannot hold on to the old and receive the new at the same time. It must let go of these leaves, its past glory, to create the space for the new buds of next spring to be born. Its letting go is not an act of loss. It is an act of profound trust in the cycles of life." The The tree is not dying, it is just getting ready to rest. This story is a beautiful and gentle teaching on the necessity of letting go in our own lives. We are often like the young monk, clinging to the leaves of our past, our old identities, our past successes, our familiar ways of being, and we can see the process of change as a kind of death. But the tree's wisdom is to show that this release is a natural, necessary, and beautiful part of life. We must let go of what we have been in order to become what we are meant to be. This is not a sad thing, it is an act of profound trust and courage. It is the understanding that in order to welcome the spring, we must first have the grace to embrace the autumn. This embrace of change is what allows us to find our true identity, a lesson we learn from a man who believed his worth was in the part he played. This brings us to a tale about an actor who discovered his true self only when he had forgotten all his lines. This is the story of the actor who forgot his lines. There was a great and famous actor who was known for his incredible memory. He could perform a 3-hour play without ever missing a single word. His identity, his pride, and his entire sense of self were built on this perfect recall. In his old age, he was to give the final performance of his career in his most famous role. The theatre was filled with the most important people in the land. He walked onto the stage, the spotlight found him, and he opened his mouth to speak his first famous line, and nothing came out. His mind was a complete and total blank. A wave of icy terror washed over him. He had forgotten everything. His life's work, his identity, was gone. He stood there in a profound and terrifying silence, the expectant faces of the audience staring at him. He was no longer the great actor. He was no longer the noble character he was supposed to be. He was just a frightened, vulnerable old man, standing alone on a stage. And in that moment of complete and utter failure, a strange thing happened. He looked out at the audience, and for the first time, he was not performing. He was just there, and a single, genuine and unscripted tear rolled down his cheek. The audience, who had come to see a perfect performance, was so moved by this one real and completely authentic moment of human vulnerability that they all stood up and began to applaud. It was the greatest ovation of his entire life. He had failed completely in the role he was supposed to play, and in doing so he had finally, and for the first time, revealed his true self. This story is a profound teaching on the nature of our own carefully constructed identities. We are all, in a sense, actors on a stage, playing our roles, saying our scripted lines. We can become so attached to this performance that we are terrified of making a mistake, of being seen as imperfect. The actor's moment of forgetting was a catastrophic failure for his ego, but it was a moment of profound liberation for his spirit. It was the moment he stopped performing and simply became real. The story is a gentle invitation for us to let go of our own need to be perfect, to say the right lines, and to play our roles flawlessly. It is a reminder that it is often in our moments of vulnerability, of not knowing, of simple unscripted authenticity, that we are our most beautiful and our most true. This same simple truth is at the heart of our next story. It is a tale of a sound that can only be heard when we are completely quiet. This is the lesson of the sound of a wave. Returning to the sea, a young monk was meditating on a beach. He was trying to find a sense of his own self, but his mind was as restless as the waves. He would watch a great wave as it formed far out at sea, as it gathered its power, as it rose up into a magnificent individual form. That is me, he would think. That is my strength, my identity. And then he would watch as the wave crashed upon the shore in a great, dramatic and powerful display. But he was listening so hard to the great, loud crash of the wave's arrival that he had never paid attention to what happened next. His master came and sat beside him. "You are listening to the wave's noisy arrival," the master said, "but you are not listening to its quiet return. Listen." The monk listened in a new way. He heard the great crash of the wave, and then he heard a new sound, a soft, gentle, and almost inaudible shh, as the water of the wave was drawn back, as it released itself from the shore and merged once more with the vast, silent, and peaceful expanse of the great ocean. And in that quiet, gentle sound of return, of release, of letting go, the monk heard the sound of his own true nature. He was not the great, dramatic, and temporary wave. He was the vast, silent, and eternal ocean to which all waves, in the end, return. This story is a beautiful and poetic teaching on the two movements of our own lives. We are often obsessed with the crashing wave, the moments of doing, of achievement, of making our mark. We identify with this dramatic outward movement, but the Master's wisdom is to point us to the equal and perhaps even greater beauty of the return. This is the movement of letting go, of release, of returning to the quiet source of our own being. It is the peace that is found not in striving, but in surrender. It is the wisdom of knowing that our true identity is not in the temporary individual wave of our ego, but in the vast, interconnected, and timeless ocean of pure awareness. This same deep, quiet awareness is the only thing that is truly real, a lesson we learn from a monk who learned to distinguish between the living and the dead. This brings us to a tale of a simple flower and the wisdom it held. This is the story of the monk and the dried flower. A monk had a single beautiful flower in a vase in his cell. He loved its vibrant colour and its delicate fragrance. But as the days passed, the flower began to wilt and fade. The monk, who was deeply attached to it, could not bear to throw it away, so he kept the dried, brown, and withered flower in its vase. "I will keep it," he thought, "to remember its beauty." His master came into his cell and saw the dead flower. "Why do you keep this?" the master asked. "To remember how beautiful it once was," the monk replied. "You are a fool," the master said. But his voice was kind. "You are clinging to a dead memory, and because of that your vase is not empty. And because your vase is not empty, you cannot go out into the garden and pick one of the fresh, new, and living flowers that is blooming today." And he took the dead flower, and he crumbled it to dust in his hand. This story is a direct and powerful teaching on our attachment to the past. We are often like the monk, clinging to the dried flowers of our old memories, the memory of a past love, of a past success, of a time when we were younger or happier. We hold on to these dead things, believing that they honour the past. But the Master's wisdom is to see that this clinging is what prevents us from being fully alive in the present. The empty vase is a mind that is not cluttered with the past. It is only an empty vase that can receive the gift of the fresh, new, and living flower of this very moment. The story is a loving but firm invitation to look at our own hearts. What dried flowers are we still holding on to, and are we willing to let them go, to crumble them to dust, so that we can make space for the new life that is waiting for us right now? This new life is often found not in a grand plan, but in the simple courage to take the next step. This brings us to a story about a student who was a master of maps, but a novice in the art of walking. This is the story of the unwritten plan. A young man was about to set out on a great and perilous journey. He spent an entire year preparing. He bought the most detailed maps. He read all the traveller's guides, and he plotted out his every step for the next 5 years. He had a plan for every river crossing, every mountain pass, and every possible contingency. He felt secure and in control. He went to a Zen master to receive a final blessing for his journey. He proudly showed the master his great, intricate, and perfect plan. The master looked at the beautiful maps and the detailed itineraries. Then he did something unexpected. He took a single, unlit candle, and he lit the corner of the man's great plan on fire. "What are you doing?" the man cried, in horror, as his perfect plan turned to black ash. "I have just given you the greatest blessing of all," the master said calmly. "I have given you the gift of your own journey. Your plan was a beautiful prison. It was a story about the future that you were going to try and force the world to obey. But the world is a living, breathing, and unpredictable thing. It does not obey our plans. True preparedness is not in having a perfect map. It is in having a brave and an open heart that is ready to meet the unknown with a sense of wonder. Now you have no plan. Now and only now can your real journey begin." This story is a powerful teaching on letting go of our attachment to our own plans and our need for certainty. We are a culture that believes in planning, in controlling the future, and this can be a useful skill. But the Master's wisdom is to see that our plans can also become a cage that prevents us from being truly alive and responsive to the reality of the present moment. The fire is a metaphor for the way life itself will always burn up our neat and tidy plans. The life-changing insight is to see this not as a failure, but as an invitation. It is an invitation to let go of our rigid expectations, to trust our own inner resources, and to have the courage to walk into the beautiful, unwritten, and mysterious adventure of our own lives. The same mysterious adventure is the theme of our next story. It is a tale that brings us back to the most simple and profound reality of our own mind. It is a story about a seeker who learned that the greatest truth is not a thing to be found, but a way of seeing to be lived. This is the story of the reflection that left the pond. A young monk had been meditating for many years on a single question: what is my true self? He would sit by a perfectly still pond and gaze at his own reflection. He saw the reflection of his face, of the trees and of the sky. This is my mind, he thought. It is a clear and perfect mirror that reflects the world. He was very proud of the stillness he had cultivated. One day, as he was sitting, a great white crane landed gracefully at the edge of the pond. Its magnificent reflection appeared in the water. A moment later, the crane let out a cry and flew away into the sky, and its reflection, without a moment's hesitation and without leaving a single trace behind, left the pond as well. In that instant, the monk was enlightened. He had been thinking of his mind as a thing, a mirror that held the reflections. But the crane's reflection had shown him a deeper truth. His mind was not the mirror. His mind was the vast, open, and empty sky itself. The reflections, the thoughts, the feelings, the experiences, they were like the birds, arriving for a moment and then flying away, leaving no trace. His true nature was not the fleeting reflection. It was the vast, silent, and unchanging sky-like awareness in which all reflections come and go. That clear, sky-like awareness, which holds all of our experiences without being stained by them, is our true home. This brings us to a quiet teaching about a student who learned that the greatest truth is not a thing to be held, but a way of being to be lived. This is the story of the student who erased the map. A young student of Zen was a brilliant cartographer. He believed that if he could just create a perfect map of the spiritual path, he would understand it completely. He spent 10 years studying all the ancient texts and drawing a magnificent, intricate map. It showed every stage of development, every potential pitfall, and every landmark on the way to enlightenment. It was a masterpiece of conceptual knowledge. He proudly presented his perfect map to his master. The master, a simple and direct woman, looked at the map for a long time. "This is a very beautiful map," she said. "You have shown me the way to the river." Then she took a wet cloth, and with a single, gentle wipe, she erased the entire magnificent map, leaving the scroll a blank and empty white. "Now," she said, her eyes full of a deep and loving wisdom, "show me how you swim." This story is a powerful Zen teaching on the difference between the map and the territory. We are often like the student, believing that if we can just acquire enough knowledge, if we can just have the perfect intellectual understanding, then we will be safe, then we will be enlightened. The map is all of our concepts, our beliefs, and our theories about life. The Master's radical act of erasing the map is not an act of destruction, it is an act of liberation. It is a loving and urgent invitation to stop studying the map and to start living the journey. True wisdom is not found in a perfect concept of the river. It is found in the direct, wet, and often messy experience of learning how to swim in the river of our own life. This same direct experience is often where we find our deepest joy, a truth we discover in a story about an artist who was a prisoner of his own skill. This brings us to the tale of the burden of the perfect song. There was a musician who was famous for playing a single perfect song on his flute. He had practiced it for so long that it was technically flawless, a breathtaking display of virtuosity. People would come from all over the land to hear him play the perfect song. But the musician was not happy. He was a prisoner of his own perfection. He was so afraid of playing a single wrong note that his music had become a source of great anxiety. His song was flawless. but it was joyless. One day he was walking in the mountains, and he heard a simple, uneducated shepherd boy playing a small, crude, homemade flute. The boy's song was not perfect. He missed a few notes, and his rhythm was a little uneven, but he was playing with a pure, unself-conscious, and overflowing joy. He was not performing a song, he was the song. His simple, imperfect music was more alive and more beautiful than anything the great musician had ever played. The master musician sat and listened, his own priceless flute feeling heavy and dead in his hands, and he understood. He had been so focused on not making a mistake that he had forgotten how to make music. That day he broke his perfect flute, and he began the long, slow and joyful journey of learning to play again, not from his memory, but from his heart. This story is a gentle teaching on the nature of our own striving for perfection. We often believe that our happiness lies in achieving a flawless performance, in our work, in our relationships, in our lives. But this very fear of making a mistake can be the thing that robs us of our joy and our authenticity. The shepherd boy is a great Zen master. He teaches us that true beauty is found not in technical perfection, but in a wholehearted and joyful participation in the moment. The story is an invitation to let go of our own perfect song, and to have the courage to play the simple, sometimes flawed, but always authentic music of our own heart. This same authenticity is often found only when we are willing to let go of what we have. So it brings us to a quiet story of a man who believed his wealth was his security, until he discovered a greater treasure in its absence. This is the tale of the merchant's last coin. A wealthy merchant who had been a man of great greed his entire life was old and dying. He had his servants bring all of his gold and all of his jewels and pile them around his bed so that he could look upon his life's work. But as he looked at all his treasures, he felt only a great and a terrifying emptiness. A Zen monk who was a childhood friend came to visit him. The merchant looked at the monk, whose only possession was a simple worn robe. "I have all of this," the merchant whispered, "and I feel nothing. You have nothing, and you are at peace. What is your secret?" The monk reached into a small pocket in his robe and took out a single small copper coin. It was the only money he had in the world. He pressed it into the merchant's hand. "In my life," the monk said, "I have learned that the joy is not in the having, but in the giving. This is all I have. Please accept it as a gift." The dying merchant held the one small warm coin in his own cold hand, and in that one simple and completely selfless act of generosity, he felt a warmth spread through his heart that all his own gold had never been able to give him. He understood, in his final moment, that the only treasure we can truly keep is the one we give away. This story is a profound teaching on the nature of true wealth. The merchant had spent his life accumulating, believing that his security and happiness were in what he could hold on to. But the monk's wisdom is that this very act of grasping is what creates our sense of poverty. The true flow of life and of joy is in the act of release, of giving. The monk's single coin was worth more than all the merchant's gold because it was a vehicle for a pure and a selfless connection. The story gently asks us to consider our own lives. What are we holding on to so tightly? And what would it feel like to open our hand and to discover the great quiet joy that is found not in getting, but in giving? This same joy is often obscured by the heavy weight of our own identity. This brings us to a story about a man who was a prisoner of his own image and the simple truth that set him free. This is the tale of the man who carried his own statue. There was a man who, through great effort, had achieved a high and respected position in his community. He was seen by all as a pillar of virtue, wisdom, and strength. He was very proud of this image, and he spent all his energy maintaining it. He was always careful, always wise, always strong. He never showed a moment of weakness or doubt. It was as if he were carrying a great, heavy marble statue of his own perfect self on his back at all times, and the weight of it was crushing him. He grew deeply unhappy, but he did not know why. He went to a Zen master. "Master," he said, "I have everything a man could want: respect, honor, a good name, but I feel no joy. My life is a heavy burden." The master listened, and then he asked a simple question. "Tell me," he said, "if you were to set that great heavy statue down for just a moment, What do you think would happen?" The man was terrified by the thought. "They would see that I am not perfect," he said. "They would see that I have doubts, that I have fears. They would see that I am just an ordinary man. I would lose all their respect." "And what," the master asked, a gentle smile on his face, "do you think you would gain?" In that moment, the man understood. He would lose the respect of others, but he would gain his own life back. He would gain the freedom to be tired, the freedom to be uncertain, the freedom to be imperfect, the freedom to be human. He walked out of the master's hut, and for the first time, he let the great heavy statue of himself slip from his shoulders and fall to the ground, and he felt a lightness he had never imagined possible. This story is a powerful metaphor for the burden of our own self-image. We all carry a statue of who we think we should be, and the effort of holding it up is a source of immense and constant stress. The master's wisdom is to show that true freedom is found in the courage to let that statue go, to be willing to be seen in all of our simple, imperfect, and beautiful humanity. This same human beauty is often found not in our strength, but in our willingness to connect. This brings us to a story about a man who believed his purpose was to build walls, until he learned the greater purpose of a bridge. This is the tale of the wall that became a bridge. Two brothers lived on adjoining farms, but a bitter feud had separated them for 40 years. Their only contact was the occasional angry shout across the small creek that marked their boundary. One day, the older brother hired a wandering carpenter. "I want you to build me a wall," he said, pointing across the creek to his brother's house. "A great high fence, so that I never have to look upon that man's face again." The carpenter nodded. "I understand," he said. The older brother then left for the day. The carpenter worked hard, but he did not build a wall. When the older brother returned at sunset, he stared in disbelief. There was no fence. Instead, spanning the creek was a beautiful, simple, and gracefully arched wooden bridge. At that exact moment, his younger brother came out of his house. He saw the bridge, and his face broke into a smile. He ran across it, his arms outstretched. "Brother," he cried, "after all these years of our anger, you built a bridge. You are a better man than I." And the two brothers embraced in the middle of the bridge, their 40-year feud dissolving in that one simple act of connection. The carpenter, his work done, was quietly packing his tools. The older brother went to him. "You did not do what I asked," he said, but his voice was full of a new and gentle warmth. "You built a bridge instead of a wall." "Sometimes," the carpenter replied, "a person is so lost in their own pain that they ask for a wall, when what their heart truly needs is a bridge." This story is a beautiful teaching on the nature of compassionate action. We are often like the older brother, our hearts hurt, and our first instinct is to build a wall, to protect ourselves, to cut ourselves off. But the carpenter's wisdom is to see the deeper need, the deeper longing for connection that is hidden beneath the anger. The story is a life-changing invitation to look at our own lives. Where are we building walls? In our relationships, in our communities, in our own hearts. And what would it take to have the courage to build a bridge instead? This same courage, to choose connection over separation, is often born from a moment of profound and unexpected insight. This brings us to a tale about an artist who found his greatest inspiration not in his plan, but in its ruin. This is the story of the unfinished painting. A great artist was painting a portrait of a wise and compassionate Zen master. He was a perfectionist, and he worked for a year, capturing every detail of the master's face. But he could not get the eyes right. He wanted to capture a look of profound, otherworldly peace, but his painted eyes always looked merely human. One day, in a moment of deep frustration, he accidentally knocked over a jar of black ink, and it splashed across the face of his beautiful, almost finished portrait, leaving a great, ugly, and accidental blot right over the master's left eye. The painter cried out in despair. His year of perfect work was ruined. He was about to destroy the canvas. But his own master, who was the subject of the portrait, was sitting quietly in the corner of the studio. He looked at the ruined painting. "Wait," he said. "Do not destroy it. Look again." The painter, through his own tears, looked at the mess he had made, and he saw something extraordinary. The accidental ink blot had obscured one of the perfectly painted eyes, leaving only one eye visible. And this one, remaining eye, now seen in contrast to the chaos of the black blot, seemed to hold all the peace, all the stillness, and all the profound wisdom of the universe. The accident had not ruined the painting. It had completed it. It had created a masterpiece that was 1,000 times more profound than the one he had planned. This story is a deep Zen teaching on the nature of perfection and the grace of accidents. We are often like the painter, with a perfect picture in our minds of how our lives should be. And when an accident happens, a mistake, a failure, a loss, we see it as a flaw that has ruined the picture. But the master's wisdom is to look again. It is the practice of seeing our life's blots, not as mistakes, but as a part of a larger, more mysterious, and often more beautiful pattern. It is in our imperfections, in the things we did not plan, that our true character and our deepest beauty are often revealed. This same beauty is often found only when we are willing to let go of our own journey's map. This brings us to a quiet story about a traveller who learned that the greatest discoveries are made when we are truly lost. This is the tale of the footprints that were washed away. A pilgrim was on a long journey to a sacred shrine. He was a very meticulous man, and he was very proud of the clear and direct path he was making. He would look back and see his own neat line of footprints in the sand, a perfect record of his progress. One day he was walking along a vast and empty beach. He had been walking all day, and he looked back with satisfaction at the long straight line of his footprints stretching for miles behind him. "I am a great pilgrim," he thought. "My path is true." Just then the tide began to come in. A single wide and gentle wave washed up the beach, and in a moment it had completely erased his entire line of footprints. His entire day's work, his entire record of progress was gone. He was filled with a sense of despair and futility. "What is the point?" he cried out to the empty sea. I walk, and the world just erases my every step." And in the great silence that followed, a quiet voice seemed to whisper to him from the sound of the waves. "The point," the voice said, "is not in the footprints you leave behind. The point is in the feeling of the sand beneath your feet in this very moment. You have been so busy looking at your past that you have forgotten to be here for your journey." This story is a simple but profound teaching on letting go of our attachment to our own past, to our own story of progress. We are often like the pilgrim, measuring our lives by the footprints we are leaving, our achievements, our accomplishments, our resume. We look back for a sense of security and identity, but the wisdom of the ocean is to show that life is a constant process of washing away. The present moment is all that ever truly exists. The story is a life-changing invitation to turn our attention from the past that is already gone and to bring our full, wholehearted presence to the simple, direct, and living reality of this one, single and unrepeatable step. When we can be fully present in this way, we can discover that the identity we cling to is the very thing that limits us. This brings us to a tale of a monk who was a prisoner of his own name and the simple act that set him free. This is the story of the monk who lost his name. In a great monastery there was a monk who was the head of all the scholarly studies. His name was Jayananda, which meant the joy of victory, and he was very proud of his name and his position. He was a man of great knowledge, but he was also a man of great ego. One day a simple, illiterate and unknown wandering monk came to the monastery. The two monks were asked to have a Dharma debate. Jayananda, the great scholar, presented a brilliant, complex and unassailable argument. The wandering monk did not try to argue back. He simply sat in a state of profound and humble silence, and he listened with his whole heart. When the debate was over, the abbot of the monastery declared the wandering monk the winner. Jayananda was humiliated and enraged. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "I won every point." "He did not say a single word." "That is correct," the abbot replied. "You won the argument, but he won the silence. You were busy defending your own name, the joy of victory, but he had no name and no victory to defend, and so he was completely free. From this day forward," the abbot declared, "you will no longer be called Jayananda. You will take the name of this wandering monk who is called Anatta, which means no self. And you will take his humble job of washing the monastery's floors until you have learned the joy of having nothing to win." This story is a deep teaching on the nature of the ego, our names, our titles, our identities, can become a kind of armor that we are constantly defending. Jayananda's great knowledge was not a source of wisdom but a weapon for his ego. The wandering monk's no-self was his greatest strength. Because he had nothing to defend, he could be completely open and present. The abbot's instruction is a classic Zen shock tactic. It is a loving but firm intervention designed to break the student's identification with his own egoic story. The story is a powerful reminder that our greatest freedom is found not in building up a great and impressive self, but in the simple, humble, and liberating joy of letting it all go. This same joy is often found not in what we can hold, but in the very emptiness of our own hands. This brings us to a quiet story about a student who was given a single object, and the profound lesson he learned from its nature. This is the tale of the cup that held the emptiness. A young student came to a tea master. He was a very serious and very tense young man. "Master," he said, "my mind is so full of thoughts. I have no space, no peace. Please teach me the wisdom of emptiness." The master did not speak. He simply took 2 teacups. One was a magnificent solid gold cup, heavy and ornate. The other was a simple, plain, and very thin porcelain cup. He handed both to the student. "Hold these," he said. The student held the heavy gold cup. "This cup," the master said, "is very full. It is full of its own importance, its own value, its own goldness. It is very beautiful, but its true purpose, the holding of the tea, is almost secondary to its own form." Then the master gestured to the simple porcelain cup. "Now feel this one," he said. "This cup is almost not there. It is so thin, so light. Its own form is completely in service to what it will hold. It is almost nothing. It is almost pure, receptive space. It is almost pure emptiness. The purpose of a cup," the master said, "is not in its own substance, but in its own emptiness. It is the emptiness inside that makes it useful." The student looked at the simple, empty cup in his hands, and he understood. He had been trying to get rid of his thoughts to create a peaceful mind. The master had shown him that the peaceful, empty, and receptive mind was already here. It was his true nature. He did not need to create it. He just needed to stop filling it with his own sense of self-importance. This story is a classic Taoist and Zen teaching on the usefulness of the useless and the power of emptiness. We live in a world that celebrates fullness, substance, and accomplishment. We are always trying to be the golden cup, but the master's wisdom is to see that our true power, our true capacity to hold the tea of life, is in our own inner spaciousness, our own emptiness. The story is a gentle invitation to value the quiet, receptive, and empty spaces in our own lives, and to discover that it is in this very emptiness that our greatest treasures are held. This same treasure is often found only when we are willing to let go of our own limited ideas of who we are and what we are capable of. This brings us to a tale that brings us back to the most simple, profound, and often missed reality of our own journey. This is the tale of the unsung hero. In a small village that was constantly being terrorized by a fierce and cruel bandit, there lived a young man who was a student of martial arts. He dreamed of being a great hero. He would practice day and night, imagining the day he would single-handedly defeat the bandit and save the village. The day came when the bandit rode into the village, more arrogant and threatening than ever. The young student, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and heroic ambition, took his sword and went to confront him. But on his way to the village square, he passed the humble hut of the village's quietest and most unassuming resident, an old Zen master who spent his days simply mending the village's broken tools. The student saw the master come out of his hut. The master did not have a sword. He was just carrying a small, steaming pot of tea. The master walked directly up to the fierce bandit, who was shouting and threatening the villagers. The bandit looked at this small, frail, old man with contempt. "Get out of my way, old fool," he snarled, "before I cut you down." The old master did not say a word. He just looked at the bandit, and his eyes were full of a deep, simple, and unwavering compassion. He saw not a monster, but just a deeply unhappy and frightened man. And with a simple human gesture, he held out the pot of tea. "You look thirsty," he said. Please, share some tea with me." The bandit was so completely stunned by this unexpected and fearless act of simple human kindness that his rage, his armor, and his entire identity as a fierce bandit simply crumbled. He dropped his sword, and he began to weep. The village was saved not by a great hero with a sword, but by a quiet old man with a pot of tea. This quiet story is a beautiful teaching on the nature of true strength and courageous action. The young student represents our conventional idea of a hero, one who defeats evil with a greater force. But the master embodies a deeper, more profound kind of courage. It is the courage to meet aggression not with more aggression, but with a fearless and an open heart. He saw past the bandit's terrifying mask to the suffering human being within. His simple, compassionate, and disarming act was 1,000 times more powerful than any sword. The story is a life-changing reminder that the greatest battles are not won through fighting, but through a radical and a fearless act of human connection. It is a reminder that the greatest hero is often the quiet, unsung one, who has the courage to meet the world's pain not with a sword, but with a simple, warm, and healing cup of tea. That simple, healing cup of tea, offered without fear, reminds us that the greatest power is often the most gentle. This same gentleness is what allows us to let go of our most stubborn attachments, as our next story shows. It is a tale of a man who believed his wisdom was in his words, and the silent lesson that freed him. This is the tale of the calligrapher's last brush. A master calligrapher, renowned for the life and spirit in his brushstrokes, had one possession he treasured above all, a single perfect brush given to him by his own master. He believed the brush held a special power, that it was the source of his art. One winter, a terrible famine fell upon his province. The calligrapher's own village was full of hungry and freezing people. He gave away all his food and all his money until he had nothing left. One night, a poor woman came to his door, her child shivering in her arms. "Master," she wept, "we have no wood for a fire. We will not survive the night." The master looked at the woman and her child, and his heart was filled with a deep, aching compassion. He had nothing left to give. He looked around his bare room, and his eyes fell upon his one last treasured possession, his beautiful, perfect brush, with its handle of smooth, aged bamboo. Without a moment's hesitation, he took the brush, and with a single, clean snap, he broke the handle in two. "Here," he said, handing the pieces to the woman. "This is not much, but it will burn for a little while." After she had gone, the master sat in his cold, dark room. He had just destroyed the one thing he had loved most in the world, but instead of sorrow, he felt a profound and a radiant lightness. He realized that his art had never been in the brush. It had always been in the heart that was willing to give the brush away. This story is a deep and poignant teaching on the nature of non-attachment. The calligrapher's brush represents our most cherished identity, our most special skill. The thing we believe makes us who we are. His willingness to destroy it in an act of pure compassion was his final and greatest masterpiece. It was an act of complete letting go. The story teaches us that our true value, our true art, is not in the tools we use or the skills we possess. It is in the quality of our own compassionate and selfless heart. This same compassion is what allows us to let go of our most cherished promises, especially the ones we have made to ourselves. This brings us to a quiet story of a monk who learned that sometimes the greatest faithfulness is in the breaking of a vow. This is the tale of the unkept promise. A young monk had made a solemn vow to meditate in a remote mountain cave for 3 years, 3 months, and 3 days, in complete and unbroken solitude. He saw this great act of discipline as the key to his enlightenment. He was in the final week of his long retreat. His mind was clear and still, and he was on the verge of a great breakthrough. But one afternoon, a terrible storm swept through the mountains. From his cave, he heard a faint cry for help. He looked out and saw that a small child, a shepherd boy, had fallen, and his leg was badly broken. The boy was bleeding, and he would not survive the night in the freezing rain. The monk was thrown into a state of deep turmoil. To leave the cave now, just a few days before the end, would be to break his sacred vow, to throw away years of perfect discipline, but to stay would be to allow the child to die. He sat in his cave, his heart at war with his mind. And then he understood. His vow of solitude was a promise he had made to his own ambition, to his own idea of what enlightenment was. The crying child was the living, suffering reality of the world, asking for his help right now. He walked out of his cave, into the storm, and he broke his perfect promise. He carried the child on his back for miles, down the treacherous path to the village. And as he walked, with the warm, trusting weight of the child in his arms, his heart was filled with a peace more profound than he had ever found in all his years of solitary meditation. This story is a powerful teaching on the difference between the rules of the path and the heart of the path. We often become attached to our own spiritual disciplines, our own perfect practices. These can become a form of rigid pride. But the monk's great insight was that true compassion is a higher law than any personal vow. The story is a life-changing reminder that our spiritual practice is not meant to take us away from the world, but to prepare us to meet the suffering of the world with a brave and an open heart. This open heart is often found not in our moments of great insight, but in our acceptance of our own simple confusion. This brings us to a tale of a student who learned that the greatest wisdom is in knowing what to do with a simple cup of water. This is the story of the tea master and the spilled water. A young, clumsy student was serving tea to a great and revered Zen tea master. The student was very nervous, and his hands were trembling. As he was handing the cup to the master, he stumbled, and the hot tea splashed onto the master's beautiful, ancient and priceless robe, leaving a large, dark stain. The student was filled with a horror and a shame so deep he wanted the earth to swallow him. He fell to his knees, expecting to be banished from the school forever. The master looked at the stain on his robe. He looked at the terrified young student, and he did not say a word of anger. He simply asked, "Now that the tea is spilled and the robe is stained, what is the best thing to do?" The student, through his own tears, did not know what to say. The master then took a clean, wet cloth, and he gently began to blot the stain on his own robe. "When the tea is spilled," he said softly, "we clean the robe, that is all. There is no need for a story of blame. There is no need for a story of shame. There is only the simple, direct and compassionate action that this moment is asking for." This simple story is a profound teaching on the nature of mistakes and acceptance. We are all like the student. When we spill the tea in our own lives, when we make a mistake, when we fail, when we hurt someone, our first reaction is often to fall into a story of shame, of blame, of self-recrimination. We get lost in the drama of what has happened. The master's wisdom is to cut through all of that. His question, "What is the best thing to do now?" is the essence of mindful living. It is a radical call to let go of the past, even the past of 1 second ago, and to bring our full, clear, and compassionate attention to the simple, practical needs of the present moment. When we can meet the present in this way, we can discover that the most profound growth is a process not of grasping, but of release. This brings us to a quiet story from a garden, and the lesson of the seed that let go of the earth. A wise old gardener was teaching his young grandchild about planting. He held out a small, hard and tightly closed seed in his palm. "This seed," he said, "holds the promise of a magnificent tree, but it has a great and a difficult choice to make." "What is the choice?" the child asked. "Right now," the gardener explained, "this seed is safe. It is solid, it is self-contained, and it knows exactly who it is, a seed. To remain a seed is to remain safe, but it is to never grow. The other choice is to let go, to be planted in the dark earth, to allow its own hard shell to break open, to completely and utterly let go of its identity as a seed, and to trust that in that breaking, a new and a greater life that it cannot yet imagine will be born." He then gently planted the seed in the soft, dark soil. "And so," he said, "the great work of all living things is this, to have the courage to let go of the life we have known, in order to welcome the life that is waiting to be born." This story is a beautiful and simple metaphor for the process of all personal and spiritual growth. We are often like the seed, clinging to our familiar identity, to our safe and known ways of being. The thought of letting go of this, of allowing our own hard shell of ego and habit to be broken, can be terrifying. It can feel like a death. breaks, but the gardener's wisdom is that this very breaking is the prerequisite for all new life. We cannot grow and remain the same at the same time. The story is a gentle and a life-changing invitation to trust the process of our own becoming. It is to have the courage to let go of the seed of who we have been, and to trust in the beautiful, unknown, and magnificent tree that we are in the process of becoming. This same process of becoming is often perfected not by focusing on the goal, but by letting go of it completely. This brings us to a story about an archer who discovered that the only way to hit the target was to forget it. This is the tale of the archer who released the target. A master archer was teaching his student. The student had a perfect stance, a powerful bow, and a keen eye, but he always missed the target. He was so focused on the bullseye, so desperate to hit it, that his entire body was filled with a subtle tension that would always pull his arrow just slightly off course. "You are trying too hard," the master said. "Your desire is getting in the way. Today we will not shoot at the target. We will shoot at the sky." He took the student to a wide, open field. "There is no target here," he said, "so you cannot miss. There is no goal, so there is no failure. Your only task is to feel the joy of the bow, the beauty of the arrow's flight, and the great open freedom of the sky." The student did as he was told. He drew his bow, and for the first time there was no tension, no anxiety. He was not trying to do anything. He was just enjoying the simple, beautiful act of archery. He released the arrow, and he watched it soar in a perfect, graceful arc into the vast, empty blue. He did this again and again, and a deep sense of peace and joy filled him. After many hours, the master silently placed a target in the middle of the field. "Now," he said, "just continue what you have been doing. Do not think of the target. Just enjoy the flight of the arrow." The student drew his bow, his mind as vast and as empty as the sky he had been shooting at. He released the arrow without any thought of the outcome, and it flew, straight and true, and struck the exact center of the bullseye. This story is a profound teaching on the paradox of letting go. We are often like the student, our lives so focused on hitting a target, a goal, an ambition, an outcome, that the very intensity of our desire creates a tension that prevents us from achieving it. The master's wisdom is to let go of the goal and to fall in love with the process. When the archer could find the joy in the simple act of shooting, the perfect outcome arose naturally and effortlessly. This is a life-changing lesson for all our endeavors. When we can let go of our desperate attachment to the result, we are free to bring our full, relaxed, and joyful presence to the process itself. And in that joyful presence, we often find that we achieve our goals with a grace and an ease that striving could never provide. This same grace is often found when we are willing to let go of the parts of ourselves we have tried to leave behind. This brings us to a quiet story of a man who was followed by a shadow, and the simple act that turned it into a friend. This is the tale of the shadow that was left behind. A man had spent the first half of his life in a state of great unhappiness and had made many mistakes. He decided to leave his old life behind and to start a new one. He travelled to a distant land and he became a new person. He was kind, he was wise, and he was respected, but he was always haunted by the shadow of his former self. He lived in fear that someone would discover his past. He was always looking over his shoulder and he could never be completely at peace. One day he was walking on a long, straight road. He saw a dark figure far behind him, and his heart was filled with fear. He began to walk faster, but the figure behind him also began to walk faster. He broke into a run, and the figure also began to run. He was in a desperate race with his own past. Finally exhausted, he could run no more. He collapsed by the side of the road, and he waited for the dark figure to overtake him. He surrendered. The figure came and stood over him. The man looked up and he saw that the figure was a travelling Zen monk. "Why were you running so fast, my friend?" the monk asked. "I was running from my own shadow," the man confessed, his voice full of shame. "Ah," the monk said, his voice full of a deep and a gentle compassion. "The only way to make peace with your shadow is not to run from it, but to turn and walk with it. It is a part of your journey. It has made you who you are. When you can walk with it as a friend, it will no longer have any power over you. And the two of them walked on together, and for the first time the man did not look over his shoulder. He just walked. This story is a beautiful teaching on the nature of self-acceptance and the integration of our own past. We are often like the man trying to outrun the shadow of our past mistakes and our former selves, but this is a race we can never win. The Master's wisdom is that healing comes not from rejecting our past, but from integrating it. It is the practice of turning to face our own history with a compassionate and a forgiving heart. Our past is not our enemy. It is the very soil from which our present wisdom has grown. When we can accept all the parts of our journey, even the difficult and the shameful ones, we can finally walk into our future with a sense of wholeness and peace. This wholeness is often found not in what we have accomplished, but in the simple beauty of what is. This brings us to a tale of a woman who learned that our greatest wounds can also be our most beautiful features. This is the story of the scars that were not wounds. There was a woman who, as a child, had been badly burned in a fire. The left side of her face and her body were covered in a web of thick, ugly scars. She spent her life in a state of deep shame, always trying to hide her scars with high-collared robes and by always showing people only the right, perfect side of her face. She felt that she was a broken and an ugly thing. She went to a Zen master who was also a great painter. "Master," she said, "I am a flawed and a broken person. How can I ever find peace?" The master asked her to sit for a portrait. She was horrified, but she could not refuse. "Please," she begged, "only paint my right side." The master agreed. He painted a portrait of her right side, and it was beautiful, but it was a picture of a stranger. It was not her. Then the master said, "Now you must let me paint your other side." The woman wept, but she agreed. The master painted her left side, and he did not try to hide the scars. He painted them with a deep and a loving attention. He painted their strange river-like patterns, their deep shadowed textures. He painted them not as flaws, but as the most interesting and the most profound part of her landscape. When he was finished, he showed her the two portraits, and she saw that the portrait of her perfect side was a pretty but a lifeless mask, and the portrait of her scarred side was a work of breathtaking and profound beauty. It was a face that had known suffering and had survived. It was a face that was full of character, of strength, and of a deep and a resilient grace. And for the first time, she did not see her scars as her shame. She saw them as her strength. This story is a deep teaching on the nature of self-acceptance. We all have scars, the marks of our past traumas, our disappointments, and our struggles. And we are often like the woman, trying to hide them, believing that they make us ugly or unworthy. But the Master's compassionate eye shows us a different way of seeing. Our scars are not our wounds. They are the proof that we have healed. They are the map of our own unique and courageous journey. They are what give us our depth, our character, and our capacity for a profound and an authentic compassion. This same compassion is often born in the quiet spaces of our lives, a lesson we learn from a man who believed his importance was in his words. This brings us to a quiet tale of an argument, and the profound peace that followed it. This is the story of the silence after the argument. Two old monks who had lived together in a small hermitage for 50 years had a rare and a bitter argument. Harsh words were spoken, and a deep, cold silence fell between them. They spent the rest of the day on opposite sides of their small hut, not speaking, each one stewing in his own pride and his own righteous anger. As evening fell, the older monk, whose name was Kenji, began his evening ritual of lighting a single oil lamp, but his hands were trembling with his lingering anger, and he dropped the lamp and it went out, plunging the small hut into a deep and a disorienting darkness. He sat there, in the dark and in his anger, and he was too proud to ask his brother for help. He heard his brother, Toshi, moving on the other side of the room. He expected to hear a word of mockery. Instead, he heard the soft, gentle sound of a flint being struck. And then he saw a small, warm and steady flame from Toshi's own candle appear in the darkness. Toshi did not speak. He did not say, "I told you so," or "you were wrong." He simply walked over, and he used his own flame to relight his brother's lamp. And in that one simple, silent, and unconditionally kind gesture, the 50 years of their friendship was healed. The argument and the anger and the pride, it all just dissolved into the warm, shared light. This story is a beautiful teaching on the power of compassionate action over the pride of the ego. We are often like the two monks, our relationships broken by the need to be right. We hold on to our anger and our grievances, and we allow a cold and a lonely darkness to fall between us. The great, life-changing moment is the one of simple, humble, and loving action. Toshi's gesture was a sermon that was more profound than any word. It was the simple choice to bring light rather than to win an argument. The story is a gentle invitation for us to look at the arguments in our own lives. Where are we sitting in a cold and a proud darkness? And what would be the one small and simple gesture of kindness that could bring the light back in? This quiet light is often what guides us when we feel most lost. This brings us to a story about a creature who learned that its true nature was not what it appeared to be. This is the tale of the cloud's journey. A small white and fluffy cloud was born in a clear blue sky. It was happy, and it drifted on the wind, enjoying the sun. But as it travelled, it began to gather moisture and dust from the world below. It grew larger and heavier, and its colour began to turn from a brilliant white to a dark and a heavy grey. "I am becoming ugly and impure," the cloud thought, and it was filled with a deep and a sorrowful anxiety. It drifted over a great, parched and dying desert. The earth below was cracked and brown, and the plants were all withered. The cloud, in its own heaviness and sorrow, began to weep. It rained until it had nothing left to give, until its own great, heavy and dark form had completely disappeared. It had rained itself away. "This is it," it thought. "This is the end of me." But then it found that it had not disappeared at all. It had simply been transformed. It was now 1,000 tiny, glistening pools of water on the desert floor, and from the earth all around those pools, 100 small, green and hopeful shoots were beginning to push their way up toward the sun, and the cloud understood. Its true purpose was not to remain a beautiful white and separate cloud in the sky. Its true purpose was to let go of its own form, to give itself away completely, so that new life could be born. This story is a beautiful and a poetic parable for the journey of our own lives. We are often like the cloud, clinging to our own form, to our own identity, and we fear the changes and the darkness that life brings. We fear the process of letting go, of giving ourselves away, because it feels like a death. But the cloud's wisdom is that this very letting go is the act of our greatest purpose and our most beautiful transformation. It is in the surrendering of our own small separate self that we become a source of life and nourishment for the world around us. This same profound nourishment is the theme of our next story. It is a tale that brings us back to the most simple, direct, and often missed reality of our own hearts. This is the story of the unclaimed treasure. A poor homeless man was sleeping on the side of the road. He had a dream. In his dream, a divine being appeared to him and said, "There is a great treasure buried for you. It is buried under the hearthstone of the wealthiest merchant in the capital city." The man woke up, and he was filled with a great hope. He began the long and difficult journey to the capital city. It took him many months. When he finally arrived, he found the merchant's magnificent house. He waited until the middle of the night, and he secretly snuck into the kitchen. He began to dig under the great stone hearth. The merchant, who was a light sleeper, heard the noise, and he came down. He found the poor man digging in his kitchen. The merchant was not an angry man. He was just curious. "What are you doing?" he asked. The poor man, terrified, told him the story of his dream. The merchant listened, and then he began to laugh. A deep, hearty, and not unkind laugh. "You are a foolish man," he said, once he had caught his breath, "to have travelled all this way because of a simple dream. I myself have had the very same dream many times. In my dream, a being tells me that a great treasure is buried under the floorboards of a poor homeless man's hut in a remote village by a river." The merchant described the poor man's own simple and now long abandoned hut perfectly. "But I am not a fool," the merchant said. "I do not go chasing after dreams." The poor man listened, and a great and a profound understanding dawned in his eyes. He bowed to the merchant, and he left. He travelled all the way back to his own village. He went to his own simple, humble, and abandoned hut, and he dug under his own floorboards, and there he found a great and a magnificent treasure, more than enough to last a lifetime. That profound homecoming, the discovery that the treasure was always buried in the unassuming place, reminds us that true value is often hidden in plain sight. This brings us to a quiet story of a man who owned nothing, and therefore was free to enjoy everything. This is the tale of the beggar's empty pockets. A Zen master who lived as a simple beggar was sitting in the marketplace, enjoying the warmth of the sun. A wealthy merchant, a man who was always in a hurry and whose mind was full of 1,000 worries, rushed by. He saw the serene look on the beggar's face and was annoyed by it. "You sit there with a foolish smile on your face," the merchant grumbled, "but you have nothing. Your pockets are empty." The Zen master looked up at the merchant, and his smile only deepened. "That is true," he said. "My pockets are empty, and because they are empty, they have room to hold the warmth of this beautiful sun. Because they are empty, they have room to hold the song of the birds. Because they are empty, they have room to hold the entire vast and beautiful sky. Your pockets," he said, looking at the merchant's bulging coin purse, "are full of your worries about what you have and your schemes to get more. They are so full there is no room for anything else. Now tell me, which of us is truly poor?" This story is a simple but profound teaching on the nature of inner wealth. We are a culture that believes in fullness, in accumulation. We are always trying to fill our pockets with more possessions, more achievements, more experiences. But the Master's wisdom is to see that this very fullness can be a kind of poverty. It can clutter our minds and our hearts, and leave no room for the simple, free, and abundant treasures of the present moment. The empty pockets of the beggar are a metaphor for a mind that is not grasping, a mind that is open, spacious, and receptive. It is a reminder that true abundance is not in what we can hold on to, but in our capacity to receive the simple, profound, and ever-present gifts of the world. This same simple presence is often the only thing that is needed, a lesson we learn from a man who believed his home was a fortress, until a storm taught him about the sky. This brings us to the story of the house without a roof. A man had spent his entire life building a strong and a perfect house. Its walls were thick, its doors were heavy, and its roof was flawless. He believed his happiness and his security were contained within this perfect structure. One night, a terrible storm, a once-in-a-lifetime typhoon, swept through his valley. The wind was so powerful that it lifted the entire perfect roof from his house and carried it away into the darkness. The man cowered in a corner as the wind and the rain filled his once perfect home. He was filled with a devastating sense of loss and failure, but when the storm had passed and the dawn came, he stood up in his now roofless house, and for the first time in his life, he saw the sunrise. He saw the vast, beautiful, and endlessly changing sky. He realized that for his entire life, he had been living in a small, dark box of his own making, and he had mistaken it for security. The storm had not destroyed his home, it had given him the sky. This story is a powerful teaching on the nature of our attachments and our ideas of safety. The house is the structure of our ego, our beliefs, our identity, the perfect story we have built about who we are. We find great security in this house. But the story shows that this very security can also be a kind of prison, a roof that cuts us off from the vast, open and boundless reality of our own true nature. The storm is a metaphor for the great transformative and often painful events of our lives that shatter our familiar structures. And the Master's wisdom is to see that this is not a tragedy, but a liberation. It is an opportunity to let go of our small, protected self and to discover that our true home is as vast and as limitless as the sky itself. This vast, limitless nature is often found only when we are willing to let go of our most cherished knowledge. This brings us to a quiet tale of a monk who was a master of the word, but a novice in the art of forgetting. This is the story of the monk who forgot the sutra. There was a monk who was renowned for his perfect memory. He had memorized the entire Diamond Sutra, and he could recite all of its thousands of words without a single mistake. He was very proud of this accomplishment, and he felt that his perfect recitation was his greatest gift to the world. One day he was reciting the sutra for a very old and very wise Zen nun. He finished his long, perfect and flawless recitation, and he waited for her praise. The old nun was silent for a long time. Then she said, "That was a very beautiful description of the river. But have you ever actually gone for a swim?" The monk was confused. "What do you mean?" "The words of the sutra," she said gently, "are a finger pointing to the moon. You have spent your life polishing the finger, but have you ever actually looked at the moon? True wisdom is not in remembering the words. It is in forgetting the words, and in having the direct, living experience that the words are pointing to." That day the monk stopped reciting the sutra, and he began the long, quiet and joyful journey of simply learning to live it. This story is a classic Zen teaching on the difference between knowledge and wisdom. We are often like the monk, believing that by accumulating spiritual knowledge, by memorizing the map, we are making progress. But the nun's gentle challenge is a life-changing one. It asks us to move from the head to the heart, from the concept to the experience. The purpose of a teaching is not to be held on to as a beautiful object of knowledge, but to be used as a raft to get to the other shore. And once we are on the other shore, the master's wisdom is that we must be willing to let go of the raft. This same letting go is the very essence of life's great journey, a lesson we learn from a river that found its fulfillment, not in arriving but in disappearing. This is the tale of the river that welcomed the sea. A great and powerful river had flowed for 1,000 miles from its source in the high mountains. Its entire life, its entire identity, had been its journey. Now it was approaching its final destination, the vast, boundless and endless ocean, and the river was afraid. It had always been its own separate and defined thing. A river, to merge with the great ocean, would be to disappear, to lose its own name, its own story, its own form. It seemed like a kind of death. The river slowed its current. It hesitated at the very edge of the sea, but the ocean seemed to whisper to it, on the tide. "Do not be afraid," the ocean said. "You are not losing yourself. You are simply coming home. You have never been just a river. You have always been me, just in a different form, on a different part of the journey." And the river, hearing this truth in the depths of its own being, let go of its last fear. It let go of its identity as a river, and with a great and a final sigh of release, it flowed into the vast, welcoming and boundless embrace of the sea. And in that moment of complete surrender, it discovered that it had not died at all. It had simply become everything. This beautiful and poetic story is a metaphor for our own spiritual journey and for our relationship with death and great change. We are like the river, so identified with our own small, separate and individual self, and we fear the ocean, the great unknown, the letting go of our own ego, the end of our own personal story. But the ocean's wisdom is that this is not an end, but a homecoming. It is the realization that our small, separate self was never the whole truth of who we are. Our true nature is as vast, as boundless, and as interconnected as the great ocean of life itself. The story is a gentle invitation to trust this great flow and to have the courage to let go of the banks of our own small self and to merge with the great, peaceful, and all-embracing sea. This same merging is often a process, not of striving, but of simply unlocking a door that was never barred. This brings us to a story about a man who was a prisoner of his own mind and the simple truth that was his key. This is the tale of the key that was thrown away. A man was trapped in a dark and lonely prison cell. He had been there for 20 years. Every day he would sit and bemoan his fate, and every day he would take a small, rusty key that he kept on a string around his neck, and he would test the lock on his cell door. But the lock was old and complicated, and he could never make it turn. One day, a new guard came to the prison. He was a man with a kind and a quiet heart. He saw the prisoner's despair. "Why do you not just open the door and leave?" the guard asked. "I cannot," the prisoner said, holding up his key. "This key does not work. I have tried for 20 years. The guard looked at the man and at the door. "My friend," he said gently, "have you ever tried turning the handle?" The prisoner, bewildered, reached out and turned the great iron handle of his cell door, and it swung silently open. The door had never been locked. His entire 20-year imprisonment had been a story he had told himself, a struggle with a lock that was not there, all while he was clutching a key that he did not need. He had been so focused on the problem of the lock and the key that he had never even checked to see if the door was open. This story is a powerful and liberating parable for our own mental prisons. We are often like the prisoner, believing that we are trapped by our anxiety, our depression, our life circumstances, and we are always searching for the key, the one therapy, the one insight, the one technique that will finally set us free. But the guard's wisdom is to point out that often the door is not even locked. Our sense of being trapped is a belief, a habit of mind, not an objective reality. The story is a life-changing invitation to stop struggling with the lock and to have the simple, direct courage to just try the handle. What if the freedom you are seeking is not something you have to earn or find, but something that is already available, right now, if you just stop believing in the reality of your own prison? This same reality is often obscured by our own judgments. This brings us to a quiet story about a man who was burdened by his own memory and the simple act that washed it clean. This is the tale of the unremembered insult. Two monks were walking together. As they passed through a village, a man who was in a terrible mood came out of his house and began to shout a stream of vile and vicious insults at the older monk. The older monk simply listened, his face calm and untroubled. When the man was finished, the monk bowed and said, "Thank you for your gift," and he continued on his way. The younger monk was furious. "How could you let him speak to you that way?" he demanded. "How could you thank him for it? We must go back and teach him a lesson." The older monk just smiled. "A gift," he said, "is only a gift if it is accepted. He offered me his anger, and I chose not to take it. Therefore it is still his. It has nothing to do with me." But the younger monk continued to fume. For the rest of the day he replayed the scene in his mind, his heart full of a righteous anger. That evening, as they were preparing for sleep, he said again, "I am still so angry at that man." The older monk looked at him with a gentle and a loving gaze. "I see," he said. "So I left that man and his anger by the side of the road this morning. But you, my dear friend, have chosen to pick him up and to carry him on your back all day." This story is a profound teaching on the nature of letting go of grievances. We are often like the younger monk. When someone offers us an insult, we take it, we pick it up, we carry it with us, and we allow it to poison our day. The older monk's wisdom is to see that another person's anger is their own creation, their own burden. We have no obligation to take it from them. The life-changing practice is in that small, silent moment of choice. Do I pick this up, or do I let it lie? When we can learn to let the insults and the slights of the world pass by without accepting them into our own hearts, we find a profound and a simple freedom. This same freedom is often found not in perfection, but in our willingness to be whole. This brings us to a tale of an artist who learned that the greatest beauty is found in the mending of what is broken. This is the story of the potter who embraced the crack. A master potter was known for his pursuit of absolute perfection. If a pot came out of the kiln with even the tiniest, most insignificant flaw, he would smash it with a hammer. One day his finest and most beautiful vase, a piece he had worked on for a month, came out of the kiln with a small hairline crack near its base. He was about to smash it, his heart full of a cold and a perfect rage, but his young daughter, who loved to watch him work, cried out, "No, father, it is still beautiful." He stopped. He looked at the vase, and he looked at the loving, accepting eyes of his daughter, and for the first time he saw the crack not as a failure but just as a part of the vase's story. He did not smash it. Instead, he did something new. He learned the ancient art of kintsugi. He carefully filled the crack not with something to hide it, but with a lacquer of pure shimmering gold. When he was finished, the vase was 1,000 times more beautiful than it had been before. The thin golden line, the memory of its brokenness, was now its most beautiful and most precious feature. And the master understood that true perfection is not the absence of flaws, but the beautiful and the compassionate art of mending what is broken. This story is a deep and a healing teaching for our own lives. We are often like the potter, striving for a flawless perfection, and we want to smash the parts of ourselves that are cracked and broken. We hide our wounds, our failures, our vulnerabilities, but the wisdom of kintsugi is the wisdom of self-compassion. It is the practice of meeting our own broken places, not with shame, but with a gentle, loving, and golden attention. The story teaches us that our wounds and our scars, when held with a tender awareness, do not have to be a source of shame. They can become our greatest beauty, our greatest strength, and the very source of our unique and our compassionate wisdom. This same wisdom often reminds us that the greatest burdens we carry are the ones we ourselves have chosen to pick up. This brings us to a quiet story of a king who believed his power was in his throne and the freedom he found in stepping away from it. This is the tale of the empty throne. There was a king who was a great and a just ruler, but he was also very weary. The weight of his kingdom, of all the decisions and all the responsibilities, was a heavy burden on his shoulders. His throne, a magnificent seat of gold and jade, felt less like a place of power and more like a prison. He heard of a Zen master who was said to possess a deep and a simple peace. He went to the master. "I am the king of this great land," he said, "but I am not the master of my own heart. I am a servant to my own duties. How can I find freedom?" The master did not offer a philosophy. He simply said, "For one day let us trade places. I will sit on your throne, you will take my simple robe and my begging bowl, and you will go and sit under the great banyan tree at the edge of the city. You will not be a king, you will just be a man, watching the world go by. That is all." The king, desperate, agreed. He spent a day in the simple robe with no duties, no decisions, and no one knowing who he was. He watched the clouds. He listened to the birds. He felt the simple warmth of the sun. He felt a lightness and a freedom he had not known since he was a small boy. That evening he returned to the palace. He saw the old master sitting peacefully on his magnificent, empty throne. "Thank you," the king said, and his voice was full of a new and a quiet authority. "You have shown me that my kingdom is not my prison. My prison was my own belief that I had to sit on the throne at all times. I have learned that true power is not in the sitting, but in the freedom to stand up and walk away." This story is a beautiful teaching on our attachment to our roles and our responsibilities. We are often like the king, so identified with what we do that we forget how to simply be. Our roles can become a heavy throne that we feel we can never leave. The Master's wisdom is to show that there is a profound healing and life-changing power in the simple act of stepping away, of letting go of our own importance, and of returning to the simple human ground of our own being. This same ground of being is often found not in what we say, but in what we are willing to leave unsaid. This brings us to a quiet tale for this journey. It is a story about a master who gave his greatest teaching, not in a great sermon, but in a moment of profound and a loving silence. This is the story of the final word that was never spoken. The great Zen master was dying. His disciples were gathered around him. For 50 years he had been a master of the spoken word. His Dharma talks were legendary for their brilliance, their wit, and their power to awaken. "Master," his senior disciple said, "you are leaving us. Please give us one final word, the one ultimate and final teaching that we can hold on to when you are gone." The master looked at all of his students, his eyes full of a deep and a boundless love. He opened his mouth as if to speak. The disciples all leaned in close, their hearts and their notebooks ready to receive his final precious word of wisdom, but no word came. The master simply looked at them, a faint, gentle, and profoundly peaceful smile on his lips. And then he closed his eyes, and he was gone. The disciples sat in a deep and a stunned silence. They were confused and a little disappointed. He had left them with nothing, but as they sat in that shared, deep, and now masterless silence, a profound understanding began to dawn in their hearts. His final teaching was not in a word. His final teaching was the silence itself. He had left them not with another concept to hold on to, but with the vast, open, and liberating space of their own quiet mind. His final unspoken word was a direct and a loving invitation for them to stop looking to him for the answer. and to finally find it in the great, peaceful and wordless silence of their own hearts. That profound, wordless silence, the Master's final and greatest sermon, reminds us that the deepest truths are communicated not through words but through the quality of our own being. This brings us to a quiet story of another master whose life was his greatest teaching. A man who showed that the heart's generosity is a treasure that can never be stolen. This is the tale of the gift of the warm robe. The Zen master Ryokan, who lived a life of great poverty and simplicity, had only one robe that was warm enough for the cold mountain winters. It was old and patched, but it was his only protection against the biting wind. One evening, a thief broke into his small, bare hut. The thief, angry and desperate, found nothing of value to steal. Ryokan, who had been meditating, saw the man suffering in his frustration. He felt not fear, but a deep and immediate compassion. "You have come a long way on a cold night," Ryokan said. "It is a shame for you to leave with nothing." He then took off his own warm winter robe, and he offered it to the thief. "Please," he said, "accept this worthless thing." The thief, stunned by this act of unconditional kindness, snatched the robe and disappeared into the night. Ryokan sat in the cold, his own body now shivering, but his heart was full of a strange and a gentle warmth. He looked out his open door at the brilliant cold moon, and he thought to himself, "Poor man, I wish I could have given him this beautiful moon." This story is a beautiful and a life-changing teaching on the nature of non-attachment and true wealth. Ryokan was so free from the idea of ownership, so unattached to his own comfort and survival, that his immediate and spontaneous response to being robbed was one of pure, selfless generosity. But the deepest teaching is in his final thought. He has just given away his only protection from the cold, and his only feeling is a gentle pity for the thief, who was able to take the robe, but who had to leave the far greater and more beautiful treasure of the moon behind. It is a profound reminder that our true riches are not in what we possess, but in our capacity to see and to appreciate the simple, boundless beauty of the world that is always freely available to us. This same deep appreciation for the world comes from a profound trust in its natural rhythms, a lesson we learn from a simple tree that understood the wisdom of letting go. This brings us to the tale of the tree that let go of the sun. A young monk was in love with the summer. He loved the long, warm, sunlit days. He saw the sun as the source of all life and all goodness. As the autumn came and the days grew shorter and colder, he was filled with a deep anxiety and a sense of loss. He would sit and watch the sun set earlier and earlier each day, and he would feel a great sorrow in his heart. He went to his master. "Master," he said, "I am afraid of the coming darkness. The sun is leaving us. How can life continue without its warmth and its light?" The master led the young monk to a great ancient oak tree whose leaves had already turned to gold and were beginning to fall. "This tree," the master said, "also loves the sun. Its entire life is a dance with the light, but it also knows that there is a time for the sun to be strong and a time for it to be gentle. It knows that in order for the deep roots to gather their strength, for the earth to rest and to dream, the brilliant light of the summer must be allowed to fade. The tree does not cling to the sun, it trusts the darkness. It lets go of the light, knowing that in its own right time it will return, and that this time of rest is a necessary and a beautiful part of the great endless cycle." This story is a gentle teaching on the wisdom of trusting the cycles of our own lives. We are often like the young monk, clinging to the summer moments, the times of joy, of energy, of success. And we can fear the winter moments, the times of sadness, of rest, of not knowing. But the tree's ancient wisdom is to show that both are necessary and beautiful parts of a larger whole. The darkness is not the enemy of the light, it is its partner. The story is a life-changing invitation to let go of our resistance to the natural ebb and flow of our own energy and our own emotions, and to trust that the times of quiet, of darkness and of rest are not a loss, but a sacred and a necessary time of gathering strength for the return of the sun. When we can trust this natural flow, we can discover that our greatest strength is not in our effort, but in our ability to release. This brings us to a quiet story about the most simple and profound of all our bodily functions, and the freedom that is hidden within it. This is the tale of the unheld breath. A student came to a Zen master. He was a man of great tension and effort. "Master," he said, "I am trying so hard to be mindful, but I am always exhausted. I try to watch my breath, but the very act of watching it makes it feel unnatural and forced." The master listened, and then he said, "You are trying to do the breathing. You believe that you are the one who is breathing. That is why you are so tired. I want you to try an experiment. For the next 10 minutes, I want you to simply lie down and to let go of the breather. Trust that the breath knows how to breathe itself. It has been doing it your whole life without any help from you. Your only job is to be the quiet, grateful witness to this simple miracle." The student lay down. At first his mind tried to control the breath, to make it deeper or slower, but slowly he began to trust the master's words. He let go. He simply allowed the breath to happen, and he discovered something extraordinary. He discovered a silent, effortless, and profoundly peaceful rhythm that was at the very center of his being. He discovered that the breath was not something he did, but a gift that was being given to him in every single moment. And in that simple letting go, he found a rest that all his years of effort had never provided. This story is a deep and a direct teaching on the nature of surrender. The breath is a powerful metaphor for life itself. We often live with an unconscious belief that we are the doer, that we have to control everything, that we have to make life happen. This creates a constant underlying tension. The Master's wisdom is to invite us to let go of the breather. It is to have the courage to trust the deep, natural intelligence of life itself. The story reminds us that peace is not something we achieve through more effort, but something we discover when we can finally let go of our effort and allow ourselves to be breathed by the great, mysterious, and loving breath of the universe. This same trust in the unknown is what allows us to face the future, not with anxiety, but with an open heart. And this brings us to a story about a man who believed his safety was in his plan and the freedom he found in its absence. This is the tale of the unwritten ending. There was a man who was a great writer of stories, but he was a man who could only ever write the beginning and the middle of a story. He could never write the end. He would create wonderful characters and intricate plots, but as he approached the final pages, a great anxiety would seize him. He needed to know that the ending would be perfect, that every thread would be tied up, that everything would make sense, and because he could never be certain, he would abandon the story and start a new one. His house was filled with hundreds of brilliant but unfinished tales. He went to a Zen master. "I am a prisoner of my own need for a perfect ending," he said. "How can I be free?" The master took a single blank sheet of paper and a brush. "I want you to write a story for me," he said, "but you are only allowed to write the first sentence." The writer did as he was told. He wrote, "The old man walked down the long, dusty road." "Good," the master said. "Now for the rest of the day, you must simply be with that one sentence. Do not think about the next one. Just be with this one, simple step of the journey." The writer sat with his sentence, and a strange peace came over him. The next day the master said, "Today you may write the second sentence," and so it went, for many weeks. The writer learned to let go of his obsession with the ending, and to simply fall in love with the quiet, simple, and profound process of placing one word and then another. He learned that the story was not in the destination, it was in the journey. And one day he found that he had written a complete and a beautiful story without ever having worried about how it would end. This story is a gentle teaching on our relationship with the future. We are often like the writer, so anxious about how our life story will end up that we cannot be fully present for the chapter we are living right now. We want the certainty of a happy ending, but life is not a book that we can read ahead in. The Master's wisdom is to teach the art of letting go of the ending and of learning to trust the process. When we can bring our full loving attention to this one single sentence of our lives, this one present moment, we discover that the journey itself is the destination. This journey often leads us into unknown territory, a place where our old maps are useless. This brings us to a quiet tale about a pilgrim who was looking for a doorway and the surprising way he found it. This is the story of the doorway in the mist. A pilgrim was on a quest to find the legendary doorway to the land of bliss, which was said to be hidden deep in a valley that was always shrouded in a thick white mist. He had a map which showed the location of the doorway, He followed the map, but the mist was so disorienting that he became completely lost. He wandered for days, his map now useless, his heart full of fear and despair. Finally he gave up. He let go of his quest. He let go of his map. He simply sat down on a mossy rock, and for the first time he did not try to go anywhere or find anything. He just sat, and he allowed himself to be completely lost in the great, white, silent emptiness of the mist. And as he sat there, in a state of complete and utter surrender, the mist in front of him seemed to grow a little thinner, and he saw, not a great, golden and magnificent doorway, but a simple, almost invisible opening in the hedge, an opening that had probably been there all along, but that he had been too busy and too anxious looking at his map to see. He walked through it, and he found himself in a simple, quiet garden, more peaceful and more beautiful than any paradise he had ever imagined. This story is a profound metaphor for our own spiritual search. We are often like the pilgrim, clutching our maps, our beliefs, our techniques, our ideas about what the path should look like, and we can become so focused on the map that we cannot see the territory. The mist is the natural state of not knowing, of the great mystery of life, and it can be terrifying. But the pilgrim's breakthrough came in the moment of surrender, the moment he was willing to let go of his map and to simply be lost. It is in this very state of humble not knowing that our eyes can finally open to the simple, direct, and often overlooked doorway that is right in front of us. When we pass through such a doorway, we often discover that the experience is one not of grand crescendo, but of quiet release. This brings us to a tale from the world of music, and the lesson of the last note of the flute. A young flutist was a student of a great Zen master. The student was a brilliant performer, and he loved the sound of his own music. He would play long, complex, and beautiful melodies, and he was very attached to the sound. He hated the moment when a song had to end. He would often hold the final note for as long as his breath could possibly last, trying to keep the beautiful sound from dying. One day his master said to him, "Your music is very beautiful, but you have not yet learned the most beautiful part of the song." "What is that, master?" the student asked. "The silence that comes after the last note," the master replied. "The silence is what gives the note its preciousness. It is the loving space that receives the sound and allows it to be complete. You are afraid of that silence, and so you cling to the note. I want you to go and practice, not the note, but the silence that follows it." The student did as he was told. He would play a single beautiful note, and then, instead of trying to hold on to it, he would focus his entire loving attention on the moment the sound dissolved, and on the deep, profound, and peaceful silence that it left behind. He learned that the silence was not an end, not an emptiness to be feared. It was a completion. It was a homecoming, and his music was transformed. It became full of a spacious, poignant, and profound beauty that it had never had before, because he had finally learned the grace of letting go. This story is a beautiful and gentle teaching on the nature of endings. We are often like the student, afraid of the silence that follows the music of our own lives. We cling to our experiences, to our relationships, to our youth, because we are afraid of the end. But the Master's wisdom is to see that it is the very fact of ending that gives our experiences their beauty and their meaning. The story is an invitation to practice playing the silence. It is to learn to let go of our experiences gracefully, to allow them to be complete, and to rest in the quiet, peaceful, and receptive silence that is always here, waiting to receive us. This same quiet reception is a lesson taught to us by nature in every moment. This brings us to a simple tale of a monk who learned the wisdom of the path from a single falling leaf. This is the story of the freedom of the fallen leaf. A young monk was filled with a deep anxiety about his own life. He was always worrying about making the right choices, about being a good monk, about what his future would hold. His mind was a tight knot of striving and fear. One autumn afternoon, he was sitting under a great maple tree with his master. A single brilliant red leaf detached itself from a high branch and began its long, slow, and graceful journey down to the earth. The young monk watched it, and he felt a great sadness. "How sad," he said. "Its life is over. It must be so afraid to fall." The master looked at the leaf, and then at his student. The leaf is not afraid, he said. For its entire life it has been holding on. It has been working, turning sunlight into life. Now its work is done, and it is not falling. It is letting go. It is surrendering to the wind and the gravity. It is a dance. Can you see the freedom in it? Can you see the great and a profound trust? The young monk looked again at the leaf as it twirled and danced in the air. He did not see a death. He saw a release. He saw a final, beautiful, and completely trusting act of letting go. And as the leaf came to rest on the soft, mossy ground, the tight knot in his own heart began, for the first time, to loosen. This story is a simple but profound teaching on the nature of surrender. We are often like the monk, believing that our lives are a matter of holding on, of effort, of control, and we see the act of letting go, of a job, of a relationship, of our own plans, as a kind of failure, as a fall. But the leaf's wisdom is to show that there is a great freedom and a profound peace to be found in the art of release. It is the trust that when we let go of our own striving, a greater wisdom, a greater intelligence, the wind of the Tao will carry us exactly where we need to be. This same journey is one that has no map, a truth we discover in our next story. It is a tale of a student who was looking for a clear path, and a master who taught him the wisdom of his own 2 feet. This is the tale of the unseen path. A student came to a Zen master. "Master," he said, "I wish to walk the path to enlightenment. Please, show me the path. Where does it begin?" The master did not point to the monastery gate or to a mountain trail. He simply pointed to the student's own 2 feet, which were standing on the simple dusty earth of the courtyard. "The path begins right here," he said. "But I cannot see it," the student protested, looking around. "I see no road, no signposts." "You are looking for the path with your eyes," the master said. "But the true path is not a thing to be seen. It is a thing to be made. It is made with every single, mindful, and wholehearted step you take, right now. The path does not exist before you walk it. The walking itself creates the path. You are not on the path. You are the path." This is a deep and liberating Zen teaching. We are often like the student, believing that the spiritual path is a pre-existing road that we must find and follow correctly. This can create a great deal of anxiety about whether we are on the right path or not. But the Master's wisdom is to show that the path is not external to us. It is the very quality of our own presence, our own awareness, as we move through our lives. Every single moment is an opportunity to create the path, to take a step with kindness, with mindfulness, with an open heart. There is no need to search for a special path. Your life, exactly as it is right now, is your path, and the journey begins and ends in the simple, profound, and sacred ground of this very moment. When we can walk in this way, we learn to trust the journey, even when we do not know the destination. This brings us to a quiet tale of a man who learned that the greatest navigation is in letting go of the rudder. This is the story of the boat without a rudder. A young man had built a strong and a beautiful boat, and he had carved a perfect, large, and powerful rudder for it. He was very proud of his ability to steer his boat, to control its every movement, and to force it to go exactly where he wanted it to go, against any wind or current. He came to a Zen master who lived on a large, quiet lake. "Master," he boasted, "I have built a perfect boat. I am the complete master of my own journey." The master looked at the beautiful boat and its great rudder. "It is a fine boat," he said, "but your journey will always be a struggle. You are always at war with the water. Let me show you a different way." The next day the master took the young man out in his own boat. It was a simple, humble boat, and it had no rudder at all. "How do you steer?" the young man asked, bewildered. "I do not steer," the master replied. "I listen." He put his hand in the water. "I feel the deep, secret currents of the lake. The lake knows where it wants to go. I simply align myself with that flow. I do not need a rudder, because I am not trying to go anywhere other than where the water is already going. My journey is a dance, not a fight." This story is a classic Taoist and Zen teaching on the wisdom of surrender and natural flow. The young man's boat with its powerful rudder is a metaphor for our own ego, which is always trying to control our lives. to steer our destiny according to its own rigid plans. This is an exhausting struggle. The master's rudderless boat is a symbol for a mind that has learned to let go of this need for control. It is a mind that has learned to trust the deep, intuitive, and wise currents of life itself. It is a life-changing shift from imposing our will to aligning our will. It is the discovery that when we can stop fighting with life, we are carried by a power and a wisdom that is far greater than our own. This same wisdom is often what allows us to let go of our deepest burdens. This brings us to a final quiet tale of a man who was a prisoner of a debt and the surprising way he was set free. This is the story of the forgiven debt. There was a man who owed a great debt to a powerful and a cruel moneylender. He could not pay it, and he lived in a constant state of fear and shame. The debt was a heavy chain that was wrapped around his entire life. One day the moneylender summoned him. "I know you cannot pay me," the moneylender said, "but I will offer you a chance. I have here a bag, and in it are 2 pebbles, one black and one white. If you draw the white pebble, your debt will be completely forgiven. If you draw the black pebble, you will be my slave for the rest of your life." The man's heart was filled with terror, but he saw that the cruel moneylender, when he was picking up the pebbles, had secretly placed 2 black pebbles into the bag. There was no way for him to win. He was trapped. He reached his trembling hand into the bag. And then he had a moment of profound insight. He drew out a pebble, and without looking at it, he accidentally fumbled and dropped it onto the rocky path, where it was immediately lost among all the other similar pebbles. "Oh, how clumsy of me," he said to the moneylender. "But do not worry. We can easily discover which pebble I chose. All we have to do is look at the one that is remaining in the bag." The moneylender, trapped in his own dishonest game, could not admit that the other pebble was also black. And so, with a face full of a silent and a grudging rage, he was forced to declare that the man had chosen the white pebble and the debt was forgiven. This story is a beautiful Zen teaching on the power of creative, out-of-the-box thinking and the art of letting go of the problem as it is presented to us. The man was in an impossible, no-win situation. As long as he played the game by the moneylender's rules, he was doomed. His liberation came in the moment he let go of the need to play the game and instead changed the frame of the problem itself. He did not solve the problem, he dissolved it. This is a life-changing lesson for all of us who feel trapped by our own difficult circumstances, by our own impossible problems. We often believe we have only 2 bad choices, but the story reminds us that there is often a third, creative and liberating path, a path that only becomes visible when we are willing to let go of our own assumptions and to look at the problem with a fresh and a clever mind.